Chapter 1202. The dragon Shadow did not know the result of that battle, because at that time, it was in a state of suppression, and was moved along with the 9 regions. But the cultivators of the 9 regions who stayed behind must have been doomed. 10,000 years had passed. The 9 regions' cultivators had been passed down for an unknown number of generations. They had long forgotten about the Hueli of the previous 9 regions. However, in the face of a crisis, they still displayed the same strength and determination as the cultivators of the southern 9 regions. Broken, 10,000 years had passed, and the gap between the 2 eras was equally huge. But there was such a choice. The dragon Shadow was a little skeptical. Could this thing be inherited? Or was this the nature of the human race? It felt the war of that year. It once struggled to get out and wanted to help the cultivators of the 9 regions, but in the end, it did not succeed. Its struggle must have been noticed by the powerful people of the 9 regions, especially the partner who sealed it. But the other party did not mean to let it out, because they knew each other very well. Let it out. Then, it would inevitably make the same choice. The human race could fight to the death without retreating, and there was no reason why the dragon race could not. Therefore, it was moved away together with the 9 prefectures. That partner left it in the 9 prefectures. To it, this was both a form of protection and also a form of trust. After the 9 regions was moved away, it was entrusted to it. No one told it this, but it knew the intention of that partner. Over the past 10,000 years, it had thought back many times and noticed some suspicious points. Even the matter of it being sealed was quite strange. That was because the mistake it had made back then wasn't that great. But that partner of its had insisted on sealing it. Perhaps at that time, the cultivators of the 9 regions period had already realized that a huge crisis was coming. This was the root of the disaster caused by the human race of the 9 regions. Naturally, it needed the human race of the 9 regions to solve it. No one wanted to involve an innocent dragon race. Sealing it in advance was to completely cut off its intention to participate in the war. How could an acquired treasure like the Tianji plate be refined in a day? No matter how powerful the cultivators of the previous 9 regions were, they still needed to spend a lot of time to refine it. Therefore, when he was sealed, those people had already started to refine the Heaven's Fate plate. Many things gradually became clear after the event, so in the later 9 regions period, it was willing to communicate with Little 9. However, that tool's spirit seemed to have a lot of guard against it, so it never came out. This was normal. Its power was still too strong for this world. Senior, if you really want to escape, then this is your only chance. If you really don't want to, then this junior will leave. Lu Yi couldn't help but urge when he saw that Longing didn't react. Even though Lu Yi had a rough idea of what Dragon Shadow was thinking, he wasn't sure what decision Dragon Shadow would make, so it wasn't appropriate for him to interfere. However, as he had said before, there were only 2 paths for Jiuzhou to take. If Dragon Shadow did not agree, then Jiuzhou could only give it their all and fight with Wuxia. It would definitely be an extremely tragic outcome, but no one would shrink back because of this. At the very least, none of the present constellation tier cultivators would. Kid, do you think you've got me? Dragon Shadow looked at Lu Yi with some hostility. That's not the case. I'm just trying to reason with Senior. Lu Yi looked at it with a sincere expression. Aren't you afraid that after I escape, you'll bring chaos to Jiuzhou? What's the use of being afraid? Jiuzhou is already in a terrible situation. So no matter what, it can't be worse than now. Of course, if Senior is willing to make a blood oath before leaving the country, then it'll be even better. Junior thanks you on behalf of Jiuzhou's human race. Dragon Shadow laughed heartily. Great blood oath. You and that Heavenly Fate plate are quite bold. You really dare to scheme. His laughter subsided, and he shouted in a heavy voice. Then quickly help me get out of trouble. Lu Yi immediately understood that this was settled. Although Xiao Jiao had previously urged him to let this dragon powerhouse make a bloodline oath, but looking at the current situation, it was simply unrealistic. In the end, this was 9 regions asking for help from others. If he quickly released this person, the other party might even return the favor. If he really wanted to talk about conditions, it would only make people feel uncomfortable. As for whether the other party would do anything to Jojo after he escaped, he couldn't care less. He could only take a gamble, since it was the companion of a certain expert in the previous Jojo period. Then even if it wanted to vent its anger, it wouldn't be too ruthless. Lu Yi didn't need to do anything to help Yangqing escape. Everything was handled by Little Nine, because from the beginning to the end, it had the ability to let Yangqing go, but it didn't do so. If not for the sudden arrival of a Sunshine Stage expert, Little Nine wouldn't have revealed Yangqing's existence. To the current Jojo, both Yu Xian and Yangqing were too dangerous. Lu Yi left the dragon spring and flew into the air. After a while, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth from all directions madly gathered and poured into the depths of the ground. The 100-peak mountain began to shake, and cracks appeared on the ground. The area within a radius of 10,000 miles was in a mess. Countless buildings in the Green Feather Mountain, Supreme Luo Sect, and Qing clan's encampments collapsed. Ruins and ruins were everywhere. The tremors spread into the distance, and soon, the entire spiritual stream battlefield was affected. The huge commotion made Lu Ye's heart jump. Fortunately, he let the spiritual stream stage expert leave this place in advance. Otherwise, many people would have died. The huge commotion lasted for a full hour. The 100-peak mountain rose and fell, as if there was a real dragon swimming underground. Every time it rose and fell, the spiritual mountains would rise high, and then fall down heavily. Half an hour later, a resounding dragon roar resounded through the heavens and the earth. The spirit peak at the center of the 100 Peaks mountain range suddenly collapsed, and a cyan silhouette swept out from within. Lu Yi looked over with wide eyes. The dragon race, I've never seen one before. I wonder what kind of power it has. But to his disappointment, the green figure that appeared was not a dragon, but a human figure. The human figure flashed in the air, and appeared 10 meters in front of him, without any warning. At this moment, Lu Yi could clearly feel an extremely mysterious energy fluctuation. Just this teleportation technique alone was truly miraculous. The figure standing in front of him was unexpectedly young. Judging from the age of his face, he was even a few years younger than him. His face was very handsome, and his posture was also very tall and straight. He also had an indescribable noble temperament. This kind of appearance was worthy of being called a handsome young man anywhere in the 9 states. But why was it a little different from what he thought? Lu Yi was suspicious, but his movements were not slow. He hurriedly bowed. Congratulations on breaking out of the cage and regaining your freedom. He began to feel uneasy, although the discussion before was not bad. What kind of attitude this dragon race expert called Yangqing had towards the 9 states. Now he had to see the real situation. If he still had a grudge against the 9 states, then today, this place would be his burial ground. If he was willing to contribute a little to the 9 states, then he should be able to return to the 9 states safely. Yangqing looked at him quietly. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Based on his cultivation realm, it was impossible for him to escape. How could he not know what Lu Yi was thinking at this moment? It was precisely because he knew that he could not help but sigh. 24 years old, and a 7th order divine sea realm cultivation. Such talent was enough, even in the current era of the 9 states. The 9 states was still the same, capable 9 states, and would not change because of a single teleportation. Given time, this realm would definitely be able to restore the glory of the Zuqin. The human race was really a magical race. Yangqing did not speak, and Lu Yi did not know what to say. However, the most dangerous time had undoubtedly passed, because if Yangqing really wanted to kill him, he would not still be standing here. Just as he was wondering if he should say something, suddenly, his shoulders sank and he soared into the sky. It was Yangqing who had raised his hand and grabbed his head. His speed was extremely fast. Lu Ye's face began to distort as the wind blew against him. He hurriedly shouted, "Senior, where are we going?" Yangqing smiled and said, "Naturally, we're returning to the 9 states." Lu Yi could not help but recall the scene of the 9 states when his consciousness was raised. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart and hurriedly said, "Senior, I can pass through the heaven's fate pillar." Before he could finish speaking, he shut his mouth, because the scene that he could only see when his mind was in a higher state of mind was now in front of his eyes. Yang Qing had already brought him out of the small world where the spirit stream battlefield was. They had arrived in the starry sky, and were rushing towards the Nine States world. This was undoubtedly an extremely rare experience, because cultivators who were not at the constellation realm could not cross the starry sky with their physical body. The omnipresent starry sky energy could improve the world energy of the constellation realm, but it was a fatal poison to those below the constellation realm. He turned his head and looked around. He saw everything that he had once sensed with his mind, and it was even more direct and shocking. Those small worlds and world fragments that drifted outside the world of the 9 prefectures had all been collected by Little Nine over the past 10,000 years. There was also a huge object lying in the starry sky not far from the 9 States world, and that was the blood-refining world. Yang Qing glanced at the blood-refining world, as if he could see through its essence at a glance. He could not help but exclaim, "Such a huge thing. It must be very satisfying to fight." Unfortunately, it had already been killed by some unknown existence. His speed was extremely fast, so fast that it was beyond Lu Ye's understanding. He did not even have much time to appreciate the scenery in the starry sky before he was brought into the 9 States world by Yang Qing, penetrating the thick clouds. For a moment the heavens and earth shook. This was the instinctive reaction of the world. Yang Qing looked up at the sky and snorted, "I'll take care of you tonight." Then he asked Lu Yi, "Where are we going?" Lu Yi had not completely recovered from the experience just now. Hearing this, he took out a map and compared it with his location, War Province, Grand Heaven City. Currently, the Constellation Realm cultivators were all gathered in War Province, waiting for his news. Chapter 1203. As soon as Lu Ye's voice fell, he felt the world spinning around him, as the scenery around him twisted and changed. When he came back to his senses, he found himself in front of a somewhat familiar hall. Looking up, he saw a plaque hanging high above with the words Light Harmony written on it. He almost wondered if he was seeing things. There was only one Light Harmony Hall in the 9 provinces, and that was in Grand Heaven City of the War Province. There was no other Light Harmony Hall. Subconsciously, he spread out his divine sense to investigate, and found that he was really in front of the Light Harmony Hall in Grand Heaven City of the War Province. How did he do it? Lu Yi was really shocked. When he was investigating, he was still somewhere in the Tsang Province. So how did he end up in the War Province in the blink of an eye? One had to know that the distance between them was more than 100,000 kilometers. Yang Qing no longer paid attention to him, and walked into the hall with his hands behind his back. Lu Yi followed him, feeling a little dizzy. The number of cultivators in the Light Harmony Hall had obviously increased by a lot. They were all 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators, who had rushed over after receiving the news. Together with the previous Constellation Realm cultivators, they had been waiting for news from Lu Yi. When Yang Qing walked in, everyone naturally saw him, and then they saw Lu Yi, who was following behind him, looking a little restless. There were many people in the hall, but it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Many pairs of eyes looked at Lu Yi inquisitively, and Lu Yi nodded lightly. When everyone's eyes met, everyone knew the true identity of this young man in azure robes, who looked a little too young for words. No one knew why a member of the dragon race could maintain a human form, but all monster beasts had the ability to transform. As the head of the 4 divine beasts, the azure dragon could do the same. Some bolder cultivators urged their divine sense to investigate Yang Qing's situation, but soon their expressions turned cold, because in the investigation of their divine sense, Yang Qing's position was empty. If they didn't look with their eyes, they wouldn't be able to detect his existence at all. Just this point alone made the people who were investigating realize that this legendary dragon was at least on the same level as Iguigu. This was an existence that the current 9 regions could not contend against. Under everyone's gazes, Yang Qing walked straight to the head of the table and sat down. She put her legs on the table, crossed her left leg over her right leg, and clasped her hands in front of her abdomen, as if she was at home. Then she said, "Let's have something to eat." No one would have thought that the first thing that such a powerhouse would say would be this. For a moment, they were all at a loss for what to do. Jian Guhong and the others glanced at Lu Yi. At this stage, only Lu Yi was in contact with Yang Qing. So, if Yang Qing had any requests to be satisfied, it was most appropriate for Lu Yi to step forward. The others could not casually interfere. Lu Yi understood tacitly. He stepped forward and said in a clear voice, "Let me introduce you all. This is Senior Yang Qing. Senior Yang has been in Jiuzhou for 10,000 years. Although he hasn't left the mountain for a long time, he is still one of us." Yang Qing glanced meaningfully at Lu Yi. She discovered that no matter what era it was, the human race was always the race with the most cunning plots. What did he mean by after 10,000 years? They had clearly been suppressed for 10,000 years, but after hearing Lu Ye's words, it did sound a bit more comfortable. Moreover, he had become one of them. Everyone bowed respectfully. They had no choice but to be respectful. Not to mention that they had a request to ask of him. Even if they didn't, his strength and age were right there. The oldest person present was Granny Jiao, who was only 2,000 years old. She was not even a fraction of the other's age. Lu Yi looked at Yang Qing again. What does Senior want to eat? Jiuzhou is vast and has abundant resources. There are also the best chefs in Haotian City. If Senior wants to eat something, I will have someone prepare it now. They were a little nervous, afraid that the other party would say that he wanted to eat people. If that happened, there would be no way to deal with him. Yang Qing said slowly, "Do you have any spiritual jades or spiritual crystals?" Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They had thought that the other party really wanted to eat, but it turned out that he wanted spiritual jades and spiritual crystals. During this period of time, the constellation realm cultivators who had entered the starry sky had more or less gained something. Because Jiuzhou had been sealed off for many years, the nearby starry sky had been unexplored. Naturally, there was a small amount of spiritual jades, but there were also spiritual crystals. Those were existences that were of a higher level than spiritual jades, and they were usually only formed in places with dense starry sky energy. Did this mean that he had taken someone's money to help them solve their problems? Everyone thought so and happily stepped forward, taking out what they had gained in the starry sky during this period of time. There were not many of them. The most they had gained was only about 100 spiritual jades, and the least was just a few. However, if they gathered them together, there were more than 1,000 of them. When the last constellation realm cultivator took out his spiritual jade, Yang Qing suddenly opened his mouth and sucked in. The thousands of spiritual jades on the table in front of him were all sucked into his mouth. Then he chewed, and the sound of crunching could be heard. The constellation realm cultivators were dumbfounded. They were well aware of the enormous amount of energy contained in the spiritual jade. To be honest, any piece of spiritual jade in their hands would be enough for them to cultivate for several days. Spiritual crystals could last longer because of their higher quality. With thousands of spiritual jades, and some spiritual crystals, not to mention a constellation realm cultivator, even a moon jade realm cultivator would probably explode and die from the impact of such a huge amount of energy. However, Yang Qing only chewed a few times casually and swallowed them whole. There was no sign of discomfort at all. This made the crowd, who did not know Yang Qing's strength, feel some confidence. With the ability he had displayed, he should be able to deal with the Sunshine Realm cultivator, right? Are there any more? Yang Qing patted his stomach, as if he had not had enough. They're all here. Lu Yi replied. It was impossible for anyone to hide anything at this time. The spiritual jades and spiritual crystals that the constellation realm cultivators had collected recently must have all been taken out. Forget it, I'll find them myself. As Yang Qing spoke, his figure suddenly flashed, and he disappeared. Lu Yi was shocked and hurriedly shouted, Senior, leave your contact details. If that ferocious person comes back, how can we contact you? All right. Don't tell me that the dragon race ran away after swindling me for a meal? That was possible, but it did not seem likely. Yang Qing had already disappeared, but his voice came from somewhere. Just pretend to be polite. Protect yourself and the 9 prefectures. I'll deal with him when I return. All right. Silence filled the Hall of Light. After a long time someone said, "What do we do now?" All right. The situation had become extremely strange. Wuxia had displayed his powerful strength in the 9 prefectures. After injuring a group of Constellation Realm cultivators, he had disappeared without a trace. Lu Yi had invited a dragon to come out of the mountain. After eating a meal of spiritual jades and spiritual crystals, the dragon had also disappeared, leaving the cultivators of the 9 prefectures staring at each other. What was certain was that Wuxia would definitely come back. However, no one knew what he was doing now. What was uncertain was whether Yangqing would come back. This was very awkward. After being sealed for 10,000 years, no matter how strong he is, he must be extremely weak right now. We should be glad that Wuxia is not in the 9 prefectures right now. Otherwise, Senior Yangqing might not be able to defeat him. Lu Yi slowly said, "That's why he asked us for spiritual jades. That's why he went to the starry sky to recover. Yes, he will come back." All right. This was to comfort everyone, and also to comfort himself. At the same time, he called out to Little Nine, "That dragon won't run away just like that, right?" "All right." Little Nine's voice sounded in his ears. "Don't worry, the dragon is a sacred beast. Unless they don't agree to anything, as long as they agree, they will definitely keep their promise." "All right. The key is that he never promised me anything. Didn't he say that you have to pretend to be polite to Wuxia? Just do as he says." At this point, Little Nine suddenly sighed. "I'm afraid that Little Nine's life will be difficult in the future. Lu Yi, you can't leave him to die." "All right. He will find trouble with you?" Lu Yi asked. "That's for sure. He always wanted me to let him out, but I pretended that I couldn't. Now that I let him out, he will definitely take revenge. Let me tell you, Lu Yi, the dragon race is the most narrow-minded. When you interact with him in the future, don't offend him." "All right," Lu Yi said. "How stupid do I have to be to offend a dragon? Speaking of which, how is the situation at the Spirit Stream battlefield?" "All right. There's some turbulence, but it's stable. It'll be fine in a few days." "All right. That's good." "All right." The Spirit Stream battlefield was the place where the lowest level of cultivation in the 9 prefectures cultivation world cultivated. It was of great significance to the entire 9 prefectures. If something happened to the Spirit Stream battlefield, then the cultivation of the Spirit Stream realm cultivators would definitely be very troublesome. Wuxia had left, and Yangqing had also left. Everyone could only wait anxiously. This feeling of not being in control of life and death was undoubtedly terrible. They thought that the level of the 9 prefectures had increased, and the cultivators had the path to the upper realm. Their days would get better and better. However, as it turned out, they had already suffered a calamity. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable. All the Constellation Realm cultivators gathered in vast Sky City. During this time, there were constantly Divine Ocean Realm cultivators who received the news rushing over. In a short period of time, more and more cultivators gathered in vast Sky City. However, the transmission of this news was limited to a certain level. Cultivators below the Divine Ocean Realm basically did not know about this. This was because even if they knew, it would be useless. It would only disturb their state of mind. After Little Nine communicated with Lu Yi for a while, it also went into hiding. This was because it did not know when Wuxia would return. If he discovered the existence of the Heaven's Secrets Compass, then it would be a true disaster for the 9 prefectures. Right now, Wuxia only wanted to occupy the 9 prefectures. However, if he discovered the existence of the Heaven's Secrets Compass, then he would definitely refine it. Once he succeeded, then the 9 prefectures would be enslaved from the roots. Lu Yi was increasing his cultivation speed. Originally, he was not that anxious about cultivation. Because of his special cultivation method, increasing his cultivation level was not difficult for him. However, cultivators could not simply pursue the advancement of their realm. However, from the looks of it, he still had to advance to the Constellation realm first. At the very least, he had to have the ability to step into the starry sky before he could talk about the future. Please enter embark to view the latest update in your browser. Chapter 1204. While cultivating, he did not stop constructing and deducing the void spirit veins. The talent tree seemed to have a special power after the second transformation. It allowed Lu Yi to have a lot of incredible inspirations and ideas when he was constructing spirit patterns on the leaves of the talent tree. That was why he was able to make deductions. This was not entirely the talent tree's ability. The talent tree only played a guiding role. The real effect in the deduction process was Lu Yi's own foundation in the Tao of spirit veins. Only when the two complemented each other could there be the possibility of improving an existing spirit veins. Time passed quickly. After Yongqing left the 9 provinces and went missing, a month had passed. During this time, all the Constellation Realm cultivators were waiting in vast Sky City. Lu Yi did not leave the city either. He stayed in his own small courtyard. On this day, while he was cultivating, Little Nine's voice suddenly rang in his ears. "He's back." Just as Lu Yi was about to ask who had returned, Little Nine had already stopped moving. Following that, an immense pressure descended from the sky. He instantly understood that Wuxia had returned. This was undoubtedly the situation that the cultivators of the 9 provinces did not want to see the most. The 2 experts had left the 9 provinces one after another. Yongqing's whereabouts were unknown, but Wuxia was the first to return. This meant that the cultivators of the 9 provinces had to deal with him first. The key was that they did not know how long they would have to deal with him. Wuxia did not hide his return. In such a realm, there was no need for him to hide himself. From all over vast Sky City, figures gathered at the place where he had appeared. Lu Yi was among them. After a while, hundreds of people had gathered. Other than the hundreds of Constellation Realm cultivators present, the rest were Divine Sea Realm cultivators who had rushed here after hearing the news. It was Lu Yi's first time seeing Wuxia. He saw that this person was as young as Yongqing. If he really wanted to compare, he might be a few years older than Yongqing, but it was not much older. This made Lu Yi's heart tremble. Perhaps cultivators could regain their youth at the end of their cultivation. Otherwise, how could these 2 experts look so young? However, relatively speaking, Wuxia's aura was undoubtedly more violent. When Yongqing faced the cultivators of 9 regions, he had never revealed his powerful aura. He had always maintained a very peaceful posture. Wuxia swept a glance over them and snorted lightly. There was an unconcealable contempt in his eyes. He could naturally tell that this group of cultivators from the 9 provinces were unwilling to accept this. However, in the cultivation world, the strong were always respected. This was especially so in the starry skies. The higher one's cultivation was, and the higher one's realm was, the absolute right to speak and take the initiative. So what if they were unwilling to accept this? Previously, he had only slightly revealed his powerful strength and injured a group of Constellation Realm cultivators. If anyone dared to jump out at this time, he would not mind killing a few of them and making an example out of them. However, to his disappointment, the hundreds of cultivators in the 9 regions stood there quietly and looked at him, as if waiting for his instructions. This made him feel a little bored. He glanced around and looked at Jian Guhong. "What's your name?" The reason why he targeted Jian Guhong was because in the last confrontation, he sensed that this person was the strongest among the cultivators of the 9 states. What he was going to do next required the 9 regions to have a leader, so he naturally had to choose the strongest one. Jian Guhong was silent for a moment, but he still stood up and clasped his fists. "Heaven Mountain Jian Guhong." Wuxia raised his hand and sent out a jade slip. "I have a formation diagram here. No matter what method you use, you have to set up this formation within 3 months. If there's a delay, I'll kill one of you every day. If there's a delay, I'll kill 10 people if there's a delay until you finish setting up the formation." Jian Guhong took the jade slip and scanned it with his spiritual sense. Indeed, he saw an extremely complicated formation diagram. However, he was not proficient in formations, so he could not immediately tell what this formation was used for. He said, "May I ask Senior this formation?" "There's no need to ask. Just do as I say. After 3 months, I'll come and inspect it." He left behind these words coldly and soared into the sky. turning into a streak of light that shot straight into the 9 heavens. Very soon he disappeared without a trace. For a powerhouse like him, he had no interest in staying in a realm like the 9 regions. His injuries had not yet healed, so staying in the 9 regions would not benefit him. If he wanted to heal his injuries, he would have to enter the starry sky. However, this was good news for the 9 regions. This was because the cultivators of the 9 regions did not have to face the terror of this person, so there would be less trouble and danger. In fact, everyone was secretly hoping that this guy would meet Yang Qing in the starry sky and be killed by her. This was possible, although the starry sky was vast and boundless. If everyone had the same destination, it was still very easy to meet. Of course, if this person really met Yang Qing, it was especially difficult to know who would kill who. Wuxia returned and quickly left, leaving behind a square formation diagram. A group of people looked at Jian Guhong. Someone asked, "Fellow Taoist Jian, what formation diagram did he leave behind?" Jian Guhong shook his head. "I'm not sure. Take a look for yourselves." As he said this, he channeled his spiritual power into the jade slip, activating the formation diagram imprinted in the jade slip and showing it to everyone. The group of people looked at it, and for a moment, they all frowned and felt dizzy. It was because this formation diagram was too large and complicated. There were various large formations within small formations, and within the small formations, there were even smaller formations. Such a complicated formation diagram had long surpassed the existing formation system of the 9 regions. Just understanding it would take a lot of time, let alone setting it up. However, it was undeniable that such a square formation diagram was definitely a treasure that those formation cultivators coveted. If they could understand the mechanism of this formation diagram, it would definitely increase their formation attainments greatly. Among the hundreds of people, there were many who were proficient in formations. Needless to say, the pure formation cultivators naturally did not need to be mentioned. Those ghost cultivators were also proficient in formations. Wu Chang saw it and scratched his head. "What is this thing? What's its use?" Jian Guhong laughed. "I dare not say that your formation attainments are the highest in the 9 regions, but they are second to none. If you can't understand it, who can you ask?" Lu Yi was also observing. At a glance, he could see that the formation diagram contained many void spirit runes. However, seeing the spirit runes was one thing, and understanding the function of the formation was another. In addition to the void spirit runes, he also saw some other familiar spirit runes, but they were slightly different from the spirit runes he knew. This was normal. The same spirit runes could be constructed in many different ways. It was unknown where Wuxia came from in the starry sky. The spirit runes he knew might not be the same as the system of the 9 regions, so there would naturally be some differences. However, even if they were different, the effect should be the same. It was only the construction method that was different. Say, this guy ran away with injuries for more than a month, and suddenly came back to ask us to set up such a large formation. What is he trying to do? Someone looked puzzled. Wuxia's method was really unpredictable. Someone boldly guessed. Could this formation diagram be related to his recovery? Is he trying to devour the foundation of the 9 regions to recover? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Even though this guess wasn't very reliable, it really wasn't impossible. The foundation of the world could devour each other, so there was no reason why cultivators couldn't devour the foundation of the world. For a moment, everyone fell silent. If this was really the case, then should they still set up the formation? If they didn't set it up, Wuxia would definitely kill people 3 months later. At that time, no matter how many people there were in the 9 regions, it would not be enough for him to kill. However, if they set it up, the foundation of the 9 regions would be damaged in the future. This group of people would also become sinners in history. At this time, Wu Chang also said, "This formation has a trace of devouring. Maybe he really wants to do this." There were traces of devouring spirit runes in the formation diagram. Lu Yi also saw this point. However, what puzzled him was that if he really wanted to devour the foundation of the 9 regions, then, what was the explanation for the void spirit runes and other spirit runes in the formation diagram. Not to mention the other spirit runes, the main function of the void spirit runes was teleportation. What did devouring the foundation of the 9 regions have to do with teleportation? Everyone couldn't help but worry. What should we do now? No one knew what to do. Before they were sure of the function of this formation, it was indeed not good to set it up rashly. However, their fists were not as strong as the others, and they couldn't resist. Everyone looked at Feng Wujiang. Although eldest senior brother still hadn't ascended to the constellation realm, and was lagging behind many people in terms of strength, the constellations present were already used to listening to him for many years. Feng Wujiang pondered for a moment and said, "Then let's set it up. We can't resist anyway. Moreover, didn't he give us a deadline of 3 months? Before the deadline, think of a way to clarify the function of the formation diagram before making the final decision. Things like formations are difficult to set up, but destroying them is very simple. Moreover, Senior Yangqing also instructed us to pretend to be obedient. Perhaps Senior Yangqing will finish him off before the deadline." This was also the only choice that the 9 regions had at this stage. No one had any objections. Immediately, those who had cultivation in the Tao of formations copied the formation diagram and studied it carefully. At the same time, the news was spread out. It wasn't easy to set up such a complicated and huge formation diagram. At this stage, it required the cooperation of the entire 9 regions. All the cultivators who were proficient in the Tao of formations were gathered. A large amount of materials were also requisitioned. In an instant, the entire 9 regions was mobilized. Since they were going to set up the formation, they had to choose a location to set it up. Such a large formation would occupy a large area. If the area was too small, it would be impossible to set it up. Therefore, they needed a wide and flat open area. After some discussion, they chose to set up the formation on the desert plains, which was the large plain behind the defense line of the Myriad Demon Ridge in the War Province. There was a reason why they chose this place. Before they knew the specific function of this formation, it was really not suitable to set it up in a place with people. The desert plains was vast and sparsely populated. The terrain was flat, which was very suitable for setting up a formation. The ghost cultivators, including Lu Yi, began to study the formation diagram. Since they were going to set up the formation, they had to determine the location of the formation. This wasn't something that could be done by one person. It needed to be coordinated at different levels and stages. You set up an area, and I set up an area. Only in this way could it be possible to set up the formation diagram within 3 months. Chapter 1205. There were advantages to this method of arrangement. Because it was shared among everyone, the efficiency would be very high. 3 months should be enough. However, there were also disadvantages. Depending on the level of attainment in the Tao of formations, the quality of the areas that were arranged would be different. This might affect the overall operation of the formation. Moreover, if the array couldn't connect perfectly with the adjacent areas after the arrangement was completed, it would have to be rearranged, which would be very troublesome. Therefore, there needed to be a person in charge to control the overall situation. Then, the tasks of each array area would be distributed to every array cultivator or ghost cultivator who contributed. As for the person in charge, Wu Chang was naturally responsible. He had the qualifications and attainments. Formation cultivators and ghostly cultivators who were qualified to contribute to such a major event had all gathered in vast Sky City. Furthermore, more and more people were gathering. Regardless of their cultivation level, even if they were Fate Cloud River tier, they could still participate. That was because when setting up the formation, there were many insignificant areas that needed people to help out. And this was the time for Cloud River tier cultivators to contribute. Therefore, for such a big event, the more manpower that could be mobilized, the better. It wasn't just because of the 3-month time limit. For ghost cultivators and array cultivators, this array diagram from a sunshine cultivator was also a rare treasure. It would be of great help to them in improving their attainments in array Tao. No one would have thought that cultivators who were proficient in array Tao from the 9 states would gather in such a way. In the square where the celebration banquet was held, a group of people gathered to study the array diagram. The discussion was intense. Lu Yi was among them. Like the others, I was also curious about the specific function of the array diagram. I wanted to find the answer through research, but unfortunately, I didn't gain much. Tianji Lu Yi was secretly supported by Senior Year 4. He even had the title of a small shopkeeper. However, since ancient times, there were people who saw the real face of the small shopkeeper. When Lu Yi was still alive, my cultivation was lower than merchant Yunyan's. When I reached the late stage of True Lake Realm, my cultivation fell behind. Now it's even more ridiculous. I'm still in True Lake Realm, but I'm already in the First Order Divine Sea Realm. But knowing is one thing, it's hard not to have such thoughts. I feel that my temperament and cultivation are enough. A huge amount of resources were sent over without delay. Among them, there were no contributions from the various small sects, and even fewer came from Baoyuan. Those with low cultivation bases were the first to fly to Li Plains. Those with sufficient cultivation bases were the slowest to fly. Grand Sky City used a few treasured ships to send us over, which delayed us for 1 or 2 days. The preparation work for the later stage was not ruined. Next, they had to set up the array. Naturally, it was the array formation cultivators and ghost cultivators' turn to set up the array. When I saw the Merchant Union, the Merchant Union naturally saw me too. Although Wuxia had given me an 8-month deadline, everyone knew that I would return midway to monitor the situation. If I discovered that the 4 prefectures were cutting corners and making a show of it, no one would be able to withstand my wrath once I got angry. That made me feel melancholy all the time. Although there were many formation cultivators and ghost cultivators in the 4 prefectures, in such an environment, only cultivators below the Cloud River tier would be able to unleash their full power. Thus, ghost cultivators and formation cultivators above the Cloud River tier could only be used as backup. We traveled too quickly, so we haven't arrived yet. Before we arrived, we would often be assigned to different areas to assist the Cloud River tier cultivators in setting up the formations. The region that Baoyuan was responsible for was the region at the bottom right corner of the array. Those who had given me the title of king could only be self-sufficient. Since the decision had been made to set up the array, there would be people who would be careful. In setting up the array, whether it was Cloud River tier cultivators like the Merchant Union, or those like Ying Yuji who were my support, they all gained very little. Hu Po and Yi obviously also realized this problem. Thus, even though they were as lazy as Hu Po, they had also been working hard to cultivate recently. But no matter how hard we worked, we had only just advanced to the Divine Ocean tier, and the gap between our cultivation level and that of the Merchant Union was still very small. The area below Li Plains was cold and fiery, and there were often patrols, stopping time to discuss and research with a certain Cloud River tier cultivator. The amount of resources expended was definitely difficult to estimate, and the time spent would definitely be extremely long. The bad thing was that at that time, these formation cultivators and ghost cultivators above the Cloud River tier would rush over. They would often be sent out, and each of them would help out in the same region. Setting up an array was a very troublesome matter. For example, it was complicated for Baoyuan to use her spiritual power to set up an array in the future. But these array formations were basically maintained for too long. If one really wanted to maintain them for a long time, they would have to expend a small amount of manpower and resources, just like what was happening behind her. 10 days had passed, and the foundation for setting up the small array had still not been properly prepared. This was an area that occupied an area of no more than a few hundred square meters. Straightening his back, Ying Yuji strode back. So what if he was in the Divine Ocean tier? Since the world was destined to face him on its own, then he should make use of that opportunity to overcome that inner demon. Of course, I knew that cultivators were not good at competing with others. I envied those in the Divine Ocean tier, and there were even fewer people who envied me. Moreover, to set up a small array of that scale, the preparatory work in the later stages would also need to be done properly. Ying Yuji could not understand what kind of spirit pills that guy Bao Yunbin had taken, and the increase in his cultivation was practically illogical. Under the Li Plains, under Yu Chang's lead, the Merchant Alliance arrived first with a group of ghost cultivators and formation cultivators. They looked down from a low altitude, all of them silent. Dang, go over here and collect some resources. It's really enough. The Merchant Alliance raised a hand and pointed in a direction. There were no Tianji Baoyun's people guarding the resources here, so they could collect and use them as they wished. Even if there was enough, they could not replenish it at any time, so it was very convenient. What the cultivators who were proficient in formations needed to do now was not to set up the entire array under that piece of foundation. As my cultivation increased, I gradually discovered a problem. This was not that my cultivation speed was too slow, so slow that my companions and friends could not catch up at all. When the formation cultivators were studying the array in Vast Sky City and assigning tasks, the other constellation tier cultivators had not yet taken a step forward. The gap was so small that it was practically painful. The problem was that it was very slow, and there were not even fewer people joining in. In Yu Chang's assignment, there were not many people around each Cloud River tier cultivator to help. So In Yuji was extremely embarrassed. To think that In Yuji was also a dragon among men, a genius with a talent as low as 88 leaves, but compared to that guy at the Divine Ocean tier, I was practically nothing. There were so few Bao Yunbin, formation cultivators, and ghost cultivators present, so why was I assigned to the Divine Ocean tier? How big was the area within a radius of several hundred miles? The Cloud River tier formation cultivators and ghost cultivators, who could contribute at that time in the entire 4 prefectures, were at most 700 people. Spread out, almost everyone was responsible for the area within a radius of 1 or 2 miles. Just like building a house, one had to first strengthen the foundation. The stronger the foundation, the more stable the house would be. That was destined to be an extremely large project, and also destined to be something that a single cultivator could complete alone. Although that was an operation forced by the weak, it was still a huge feast. Setting up a formation was the same principle, especially that kind of small-scale formation. Not a single one was evil. A poor foundation was more convenient for setting up a formation a few days ago, and at the same time, it minimized the effects of the formation. They could only do their best, striving for perfection and the limit at this stage. That kind of huge formation was exactly the same as the one I set up later. All the formation vein patterns had to be refined and removed, and the same materials had to be chosen even if they were in the same position. It was not something that could be carefully constructed by activating spiritual power, so it was very troublesome. Just like that, 10 days ago, a small streak of light set off from Vast Sky City. The Merchant Alliance also thought of tormenting me, but they did not in the future, and even more so now. They looked at each other. The Merchant Alliance smiled slightly, and In Yuji's face was full of embarrassment. 1 inch the end, they had to face a very realistic situation. The Merchant Alliance would advance to a constellation first, leave the 4 prefectures, and step into the universe. At that time, they would definitely be separated because of this. After some contact, In Yuji found that the Spirit Sea Realm guy also had the intention of tormenting me a lot. Maybe it was because his cultivation had improved, or maybe it was because he was more open-minded. In Yuji could not help but feel relieved. Under the huge foundation, the vein patterns of the formation had finished expanding and extending. According to the current situation, although the deadline of 8 months was rushed, it was barely enough. The Merchant Alliance was also polite to me. Don't talk nonsense, go slowly. In Yuji had good intentions. He sensibly replied, "Oh bad." After taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around and glared at the Merchant Alliance. Don't call me bigging. Companions and friends were like this, and so were enemies in the future. In Yuji was also among them. According to Yu Chang's instructions, he came to the bottom right corner of the foundation. When he looked up, he almost turned around and left. In front of me, figures turned into streaks of light and landed in the same position according to the division later. Looking at the entire 4 prefectures, there were billions of cultivators. The one I wanted to see the most was not the Merchant Alliance. In the future, I would be tormented. Now I was being tormented, but before we met, I would feel inferior. They called me bad, as if we were very familiar with each other. The matter of that small formation concerned the entire 4 prefectures. Tianji Baoyin could also be involved. As a result, under Decee's secret arrangements, the amount of resources stored in Tianji Land's leaf increased overnight. When I was fighting with the others, I would occasionally ask some questions, and the Merchant Guild would try their best to answer them. After a long time, Yu Chang finally said, "Everyone, I will leave the rest to you." After saying that, I waved my small hand. "Let's get to work." I busied myself for an entire day, and only managed to complete a small but large area of the formation on the table. From this, one could see how simple it was. The deadline of 8 months seemed very small, but if nothing went wrong in the middle, it might not be enough. Although Li Plains was chosen as the location of the formation, Li Plains was too small. We still needed to find a suitable area. Ing Yuji immediately hung his head dejectedly. He thought about how hard it would be to fight under the Merchant Alliance. That meant that I would spend more time with my companions and friends. I would come into contact with new friends and enemies. The various things of the past would become memories. Please enter embark in your browser to view. Chapter 1206. Every day a large number of cultivators would come and go on the Li Plains. Every day, new patterns would be added to the array base that covered a radius of several hundred li. If in the beginning, the formation cultivators and ghost cultivators of 9 regions were forced to start this huge fortification, then after a period of time, they had changed from passive to active. They all wanted to know what such a costly array was used for. The original plan of the 9 provinces was to find an opportunity to ask Wuxia before the time limit was up. However, ever since that guy left that day, there had been no trace of him. In the blink of an eye, almost 2 months had passed, and there was still no news of him. From the looks of it, this person might really wait until the 3-month time limit was up before coming back for an inspection. At that time, if the 9 provinces completed the task he left behind, it would naturally be good for everyone. In 2 months, the area that Lu Yi was in charge of was about to be completed. Among all the array cultivators, his progress was relatively fast. This made Wu Chang very surprised. He never thought that Lu Yi would have such high attainments in the path of arrays. There were a few people who had similar progress as him, but even more were still busy. However, looking at the current situation, it would not be a problem to finish arranging this large array before the time limit was up. There was even plenty of time left to correct mistakes. At that time, if there was any inconsistency or improper arrangement, they could make slight changes. On this day, Lu Yi was still busy with the assistance of Ing Wuji and the others. According to his plan, it would take less than 3 days for the area he was in charge of to be completed. Personally participating in the arrangement of such a large array, even if he was only in charge of a small area, Lu Yi had a clearer understanding of this array. Although he did not know its specific use, this array had both the effects of teleportation and devouring, so it could not be wrong. This made people feel very strange. Teleportation and devouring had always been 2 functions that did not go hand in hand. If it was only devouring, then it could be understood that Wuxia wanted to devour the foundation of the 9 provinces in order to recover himself. However, what was teleportation used for? He could only wait for the large array to take shape and truly operate before he could find out. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked over. For some reason, the constellation realm cultivators had all risen into the air and shot towards outer space. Those who were as fast as Jian Guhong vanished with a flash of sword light, while those who were slower still had traces to follow. Wu Chang was also about to leave when Lu Yi hurriedly asked, "Senior, what happened?" Wu Chang beamed with joy. "They're fighting." Ing Wuji was stunned. "What's fighting about?" Wu Chang didn't have the time to respond. His figure flashed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ing Wuji was confused and looked at Lu Yi inquiringly. Lu Yi tried his best to perceive, but couldn't feel anything. But he knew what Wu Chang meant. There were people fighting outside the nine-continent star. Although the distance was still very far, the constellation tier cultivators had already sensed it. Thus, all of them could not hold back and ran over to watch the battle. Apart from Wuxia and Yangqing, no one else could be fighting outside the nine-continent star. Finally, the time had come. No one knew how the fight had started, but as long as Yangqing was still willing to keep his promise, he would definitely return to the nine continents and fight Wuxia. Maintenance-y? From the standpoint of the one fighting could win, he was naturally inclined to believe that Yangqing could win. It was a fact that this dragon race elite had been suppressed for 10,000 years and had long become weak. Otherwise, he would not have asked the constellation tier cultivators of the nine continents for spirit jades and spirit crystals as soon as he came out of the mountain. Then he personally entered the starry sky to search for them. 10,000 years of suppression had affected him too much. Now that it had only been 3 short months, who knew how much strength he had recovered? Fortunately, Wuxia also seemed to be injured. From this point of view, these two elites were about the same, neither taking advantage of the other. Little Nine, I also want to go and watch. Lu Yi hurriedly called out. Passively waiting here was really torturous. He also wanted to go and watch the battle, but with his own ability, he could not traverse the void with his physical body, so he could only ask Little Nine for help. As for whether Little Nine could help in this matter, Lu Yi did not know. What's there to watch? Little Nine was also anxious at this moment. When two tigers fought, one was bound to be injured, but no matter which one won, it would be the one in a difficult situation. If Yangqing won, he would definitely settle accounts with it, and its future days would not be easy. If Wuxia won, then it could only hide itself in the future, and it was not safe. Once Wuxia stayed in the nine continents for too long, he might not be unable to discover the secret of the Heavenly Secrets plate. Of course, in terms of personal feelings, it was the same as Lu Yi, hoping that Yangqing could win. At the very least, it would chase away that Wuxia. Although it was afraid that Yangqing would settle accounts with it, Little Nine was not so vicious as to hope that they would perish together. Although it said this, Little Nine still fulfilled Lu Ye's wish. Inexplicably, a large amount of pure and rich spiritual power suddenly flowed out and gathered in the sky. The spiritual power was so rich that it had condensed into liquid. In an instant, the sky seemed to be covered with a mirror. A huge mirror condensed from pure spiritual power. Everyone couldn't help but look at the mirror, and what they saw caused them to cry out in surprise. This was because after the surface of the mirror trembled and distorted slightly, it reflected the image of the vast starry sky. In the image of the mirror, there were many familiar figures. They were Jian Guhong and the others who had left earlier. This scene was like a pair of invisible eyes hanging outside the nine continents, transmitting the scene outside the nine continents star. It was undoubtedly Little Nine's doing. It could not let Lu Ye's physical body appear in the starry sky, so it used this method to satisfy him. Immediately, it caused a commotion. Many of the cultivators who stayed here felt that the Heavenly Secrets plate had appeared. Lu Yi thanked it and silently observed. He saw that in the depths of the starry sky, there was a huge light constantly flashing. Two figures were vaguely entangled in it. However, because the two figures were moving too fast, and the mirror's view was too far away, although he could see the battle over there, he could not see the situation clearly. A high-pitched dragon's roar came from the mirror, just like the dragon's roar that Lu Yi had heard at the Spirit Stream battlefield. The battle was very intense. Wherever the two figures passed, the asteroids would explode. The entire void seemed to be trembling. However, in just a moment, the two figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Soon they disappeared without a trace. The victor had been decided, because this scene was clearly one of pursuit and one of escape. It was just that no one knew who was chasing and who was escaping. Lu Yi could not help but ask, Little Nine, who is more powerful? Little Nine lazily replied, You will know in a while. Sensing its tone, Lu Yi knew that the more powerful one was Yangqing. If Wuxia was more powerful, Little Nine would not have used such a tone. Lu Yi was surprised. He had thought that even if Yangqing was more powerful, there would be a limit to his strength. After all, he had been suppressed for 10,000 years. But now, it seemed that Yang Qing was not exaggerating. When Lu Yi had asked him if he could take care of a Sunlight Realm cultivator, Yang Qing had said disdainfully that he could squash the other party with one claw. But now, it seemed that this guy was telling the truth. The fact that the victor had been decided in such a short time showed that there was a great disparity in strength. Moreover, Yang Qing must still be in a weakened state. If he was at his peak, how strong would he be? That Wuxia was very arrogant in front of the cultivators of the 9 provinces. But no one knew how panicked he was at this moment. The two figures had already disappeared into the distance. Jian Guhong and the others seemed to want to chase after them to see what was going on. But considering the great disparity in strength, they quietly waited in place. They could not catch up, so there was no need to waste energy. But from the expressions on their faces, they did not seem to have seen the changes in the battle just now. They were even less clear about who was more powerful. They could only wait with apprehension. This was the sorrow of the weak. After a while, the void in front of Jian Guhong and the others warped slightly. Then, the figure of a young man in green clothes suddenly appeared. From the outside, he did not seem injured at all. His face was calm and carefree, as if the battle just now was just a stroll after eating and drinking to his heart's content. But considering that he was carrying something in his hand, the matter was far from as simple as a stroll. At this moment, he was carrying a bloody head in his hand, and his eyes were wide open. In such a remote starry sky, how could he be so unlucky to encounter a dragon? Wuxia, who regarded the cultivators of the 9 provinces as dogs, died just like that. Jian Guhong and the others were obviously greatly shocked. On the 9 provinces' plains, many cultivators who saw this scene were also shocked. Can't watch, can't watch. Little Nine's voice sounded in Lu Ye's ears. Then, the mirror in the sky began to collapse. But the moment before it collapsed, everyone clearly saw Yang Qing throw Wuxia's head to Jian Guhong, and Jian Guhong hurriedly caught it. The cheers on the Li Plains continued, like waves, one higher than the other. The cultivators who came here, regardless of their cultivation level, had already known about Wuxia's existence through different channels. They also knew that this great array was arranged by him. For the 9 provinces, Wuxia was a veritable intruder. No one was willing to be ruled by such a person. Now that he was dead, they no longer had to worry about this matter in the future. As for Yang Qing, although not many people had seen him before, being able to kill Wuxia meant that he stood on the side of the 9 provinces. Naturally, he could get close to the cultivators of the 9 provinces. Only Lu Yi was worried. The vicious wolf was dead, but there was a fierce tiger in the family. Where should the 9 provinces go in the future? Yang Qing was willing to kill Wuxia. On the one hand, it was the price to get out of trouble. On the other hand, it was the result of 2 tigers not living on the same mountain. However, no one knew what Yang Qing's attitude toward the 9 provinces was, and no one could guarantee that he was not the second Wuxian, especially under the premise that he knew about the Tianji plate. Chapter 1207. A streak of light shot through the clouds, and over 100 figures appeared. They were a group of Constellation Realm cultivators led by Jian Guhong. He was still holding Wuxia's head, which had died with his eyes wide open. Originally, Jian Guhong wanted to use Wuxia's head to announce that the crisis had been resolved. However, after seeing the state of the cultivators here, he realized that everyone already knew the result of the previous battle. There was no need to say anything else. He immediately activated the spiritual power in his hand, and a sword light swept through the bloody head, turning it into powder. The body of a Sunshine Realm cultivator was indeed tough. However, after death, without the support of a foundation, it was only slightly tougher. It was not to the extent that Jian Guhong could not destroy it. Yang Qing was nowhere to be seen. In fact, the Constellation Realm cultivators did not know where Yang Qing had gone. When they returned to the land of the 9 provinces together, Yang Qing's figure only swayed for a moment before disappearing. No one could see where he went. The only thing they could be sure of was that he was still in the land of the 9 provinces. If an expert like him did not want to be found, No one in the land of the 9 provinces could find him. There was only one question left in front of everyone. This formation, should they continue to set it up? This inexplicable formation was set up under Wuxia's instructions, and the formation diagram was also provided by him. Now that 2 months had passed, and the land of the 9 provinces had spent a lot of manpower and resources, the formation was basically about to take shape. If they gave up now, all the previous investments would be for naught. Subconsciously, all the cultivators who participated in setting up the formation wanted to complete this matter. This was because everyone had always wanted to know what such a large-scale formation was used for. They had already traveled 90 kilometers. Was there still a need to complete the last 10 kilometers? Rashly. However, before they could figure out the specific effects of this formation, it did not seem wise to complete it. This matter was very difficult to handle. However, to be on the safe side, after the Constellation Realm cultivators discussed the formation, they finally decided to stop setting up the formation. Although it would waste a lot of resources, it was better than causing unnecessary risks. Lu Yi did not participate in the discussion. He only listened quietly at the side, mainly because he wanted to know the results of the discussion as soon as possible. To him, no matter what choice the Constellation Realm cultivators made, he could accept it. If he wanted to continue setting up the array, then he would contribute to it. If he didn't want to set up the array, then he would disperse and go home. Right now he was worried about Yangqing. It was a rabbit completely snow-white with spotless fur. It looked like a harmless rabbit. When Lu Ye's gaze met the rabbit's big watery eyes, the corner of his eyes could not help but twitch. If he was not mistaken, this rabbit was Little Nine. When he met Little Nine for the first time, Little Nine had said that it had the appearance that Lu Yi wanted. So in theory Little Nine, the artifact spirit, could transform into anything, and it was very lifelike. It was just that it usually did not appear in front of others, and only stayed behind the scenes. Who would have thought that she would transform into such a harmless little white rabbit? This was a failure in hiding and was caught. The little white rabbit stared straight at Lu Yi, its watery eyes revealing an extremely clear message. Save me. Lu Ye's face was full of regret, indicating that there was nothing he could do about it. The others did not know the rabbit's true appearance, so they could only wonder why a dragon like Yangqing would catch such a white rabbit. Could it be that he wanted to roast it? Senior Yang, the array here has been set up. Jian Guhong stepped forward. It's done. I wonder what the big gift Senior was talking about is. Yangqing smiled and casually threw the white rabbit in his hand to Lu Yi, who was standing to the side, and walked towards the array. Lu Yi caught the rabbit, and Little Nine's voice immediately rang in his ears. Heartless, you're leaving me to die. Lu Yi transmitted back. Why can't you save me? But then again, this dragon really does not seem to have any ill intentions towards the 9 provinces. If he had any ill intentions, he would have already shown it. When the gap in strength reached a certain level, there was no need for any schemes. Even if Yangqing raised his arm and called for the 9 provinces to submit to him in the future, no one would be able to resist. However, Little Nine said that the dragon race was a narrow-minded race, and Lu Yi understood this point. Just by looking at how Yangqing did nothing after killing Wuxia and returning to the 9 provinces, and only stared at Little Nine, he knew. Because Little Nine clearly had the ability to release him, but did not do so, he attacked Little Nine, and even forced Little Nine to transform into the appearance of a white rabbit to protect himself. Little Nine was also quite helpless. It was not that he did not want to release Yangqing, but the foundation of the latter 9 provinces could not withstand the torment of such a powerhouse. How could he dare to casually release him? Now that he was hated by him, he also did not want to. He sighed deeply. My life is over. Lu Yi, cultivate well. When you are able to defeat this guy in the future, you must remember to save me. Lu Yi nodded repeatedly. Don't worry, I'll protect you when the time comes. As the two of them conversed, Yangqing had already arrived at a corner of the great array. Compared to the enormous array, Yangqing's figure was very small, but as he poured his power into the array began to grow. The entire array, The great array began to buzz. His voice rang out. I'm not proficient in the way of formations, and I don't know what this formation is called. However, when I was traveling in the starry sky near the 9 regions, I discovered that someone had left some arrangements on the nearby planets. They could be said to be the nodes of the formation. Sometimes, when the distance between the 2 formations is too great, they can't communicate with each other from a distance. Thus, they need to rely on these nodes as a relay. Following the traces of those arrangements, I discovered the existence of another domain. Coincidentally, there were also some arrangements in that domain, so the situation is very clear. The basic purpose of this formation should be to transmit. As his voice fell, the huge array began to operate. A pillar of light shot up from the center of the array, and a halo instantly spread throughout the entire array. But soon, the halo began to collapse toward the center. In the blink of an eye, a slowly rotating dark vortex appeared in the center of the great array, as if it led to an unknown place. The group was dumbfounded. No one had expected that such a large array would be used for transmission, and not in the ordinary sense, but to achieve transmission between 2 realms. This was very strange. Although the cultivators of the 9 provinces present had experienced transmission, and during the previous expedition to the blood-refining realm, everyone had used transmission, but at that time, they had relied on the effect of the Pillar of Tianji, which was completely different from borrowing the power of an array. What kind of mysterious array was this to achieve the transmission between 2 realms? Luyi was also quite shocked. He could also arrange a transmission array, but the transmission array he had arranged now could only cover a range of 3 or 4 kilometers. The distance between the 2 realms was so great that it was not a distance that the transmission array he had arranged could solve. No wonder the scale was so large, and the arrangement was so complicated. If one wanted to achieve such a long-distance transmission, the scale was too small. At that moment, Little Nine's voice sounded in Lu Ye's ear. I feel it. What? Lu Ye asked quickly. The existence of another realm, and I seem to be able to devour the heritage of that realm through this spirit array. Lu Ye was extremely surprised. Really? Yes, I can indeed devour the heritage of that realm, if I want to. Then try swallowing it, Lu Ye asked calmly. No, there are too many rice seeds in that realm. I will be devoured instead, Little Nine retorted. Of course, he did not want to benefit others so easily. Otherwise, when Wuxia came, he would have directly gone to the Western universe to invite Yongkai Buddha. Chapter 1208. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. Combining the words of Little Nine and Yongqing, he slowly understood the truth of the matter. The reason why Wuxia wanted to occupy the 9 provinces was because he sensed that the 9 provinces was a domain that could rapidly grow. Therefore, he had the idea of taking the 9 provinces for himself. However, the 9 provinces at this stage could not meet his requirements. Even if he devoured the foundation of the blood refinement realm, the 9 provinces could not grow to the level he needed. If he wanted to speed up the growth of the 9 provinces, he could only provide assistance. Devouring the foundation of more domains was the idea that Wuxia came up with. Previously, he had left for a month after injuring a group of Constellation Realm cultivators, and no one knew where he had gone. Now, it seemed that he had clearly gone to find another realm in this month's time, and he had really found it. Then, he began to secretly make arrangements. However, because the 2 domains were far apart, there was no way to communicate with each other. Therefore, he could only leave some nodes on the stars between the 2 domains to act as a transit point. When Yongqing was roaming the starry sky and recovering his body, he discovered the arrangements that Wuxia had left behind. Following the clues, he found the domain and saw through Wuxia's intentions. Therefore, even if he was not proficient in array Dao, he could roughly understand the function of this array. However, there was one thing he did not notice. That was this array not only had the effect of teleportation, but it also gave Little Nine the ability to devour. This kind of devouring was not the same as devouring the foundation of the blood refinement realm. There were many divine pillars in the blood refinement realm. The divine pillars were the main source of Little Nine's devouring of the foundation of the blood refinement realm. Those divine pillars were almost equivalent to the straws that he had inserted into the blood refinement realm. Therefore, even if there was no physical connection between the 9 provinces and the blood refinement realm, he could still devour. The feeling of relying on this array was ultimately separated by a layer. It was not as fast and convenient as relying on the divine pillars, but he could still devour. This was really a big gift. Wuxia probably did not expect that his thousands of plans and schemes would end up being a wedding dress for the 9 provinces. The main reason was that he did not know that there was a dragon hidden in the 9 provinces that could casually kill him. Therefore, his death was actually very aggrieved. It was only at this moment that Lu Yi finally understood the function of the void and devouring spirit inscriptions contained within the formation. Just as he had speculated before, this formation had both the ability to teleport and devour. If one were to calculate it carefully, devouring was the most important. The function of teleportation was only to shift the foundation of the opposite domain, not to teleport. Doesn't this mean that the foundation of 9 regions can grow faster? Lu Yi couldn't help but feel excited. Now that the level of the 9 states has increased, it can give birth to constellation realm cultivators. If the 9 states before were considered a medium-sized realm in the starry sky, at this moment, the 9 regions could be regarded as a large domain. Middle-sized and large-sized did not refer to their size, but their foundation. Only a realm that could produce a constellation realm cultivator was qualified to be called a large-sized realm, because only such a realm could be connected to the universe. Above the large realms, there were still the top realms. Those were the realms that could give birth to spirit jade mines. The 9 states had not reached this level yet, but this was the direction that Little Nine was working towards. In the previous 9 states era, the 9 states was at the level of the top realms. The foundation of the blood refining realm was not enough to raise the foundation of the 9 states to the level of the top realms. But this kind of thing needed to be accumulated slowly. If there was no foundation of other realms to devour, the growth of the 9 states would not be too fast. Little Nine said, "It won't work. Right now, the foundation of the blood refining realm has not been completely devoured. This will take at least a few hundred years. Before the foundation of the blood refining realm is completely devoured, I can't devour anymore. How big your stomach is depends on how much you eat. Don't count on it." There was a limit to the speed at which the 9 states could devour the foundation of other worlds. It was not to say that it could devour as much as it wanted. So even if the 9 states could devour the foundation of the unknown domain, Little Nine could not do so. It had to digest the blood refining realm first. What's more, we still don't know the situation of that domain. If there were only humans living in that domain, it would not be easy to devour and destroy other people's homes. Little Nine's core idea was only to protect the 9 states. There were 2 guarding the 9 states, guarding the human race. So if that unknown domain was a domain where humans lived, Little Nine could not destroy it no matter what. It did not have any psychological burden to devour the blood refining realm, because that was the domain of the blood race. Moreover, devouring the foundation of the blood refining realm would not affect the survival of the human race. Now that all the major sects had established branches in the blood refining realm, those with cultivation qualifications would be sent to the 9 states. Those without cultivation qualifications would still live in the blood refining realm without any hindrance. Because the distance between the 2 domains was close enough, the teleportation did not consume too much energy. Senior Yang, since you have been to that domain, then do you know the situation of the other domain? Jian Guhong asked. Outside of the 9 regions, there were other realms. This was nothing new. Originally, the 2 realms were located in different positions in the starry sky, and had nothing to do with each other. However, now that there was such a formation that connected the 2 realms, the 9 regions could not help but treat it seriously. At the very least, he had to understand the situation in the other domain, and whether they were friends or foes. However, Yang Qing was too lazy to say anything more about this matter. His anger towards Jiuzhou had not yet subsided. It was already the limit for him to be kind enough to say a few words. How could he still take care of everything meticulously? Thus he bluntly said, "If you want to know what the situation is, you can go and see for yourself." As he said this, he raised his hand, and the white rabbit in Lu Ye's arms involuntarily flew towards him. In the next moment, Yang Qing and the white rabbit then it disappeared, leaving behind a group of 9 regions cultivators looking at each other. The array formation had been activated, and the teleportation channel had always been open. At this moment, everyone had 2 choices. One was to destroy the array formation, and the teleportation channel would naturally close. The other was to enter and explore. Another choice was placed in front of the cultivators of 9 regions. There is no doubt that Wuxia is a Sunshine Realm cultivator. We can't estimate how fast he is, but it only took him a month to find a domain and set it up. Then, we can be sure that even if the other domain is not too close to Jiuzhou, it is definitely not too far away. Jian Guhong slowly said. His words caused everyone to agree. This was also a reasonable deduction. Therefore, I feel that we should still explore and see what's the situation on the other side. Since we are not too far away, we might have some interactions in the future. It's always good to have more information. Does anyone have any opinions? How could anyone have any opinions? That was probably what everyone thought. Although the cultivators of 9 regions had just ascended to the constellation realm and stepped into the starry sky, they were not afraid of trouble. There was no reason for them to not think about solving the problem in front of them. Just as Jian Guhong said, they might have some interactions in the future. It would be best if everyone could be friends. But if they could not be friends, they had to know each other. There is a question. Lu Yi said, is there a heavenly punishment in the other domain? Once bitten, twice shy. When he came to the blood refinement realm for the second time, he was almost killed by the heavenly punishment. Therefore, this was what he was most worried about when invading other domains. The heavenly punishment of a domain was not easy to resist. Take the heavenly punishment of 9 regions for example. If a constellation realm cultivator came to 9 regions with hostility and was targeted by the heavenly punishment, he would definitely die without a burial place. Even if the Moon Jade realm came, they would also have to endure great pressure. Only Sunshine Realm cultivators would be helpless against the heavenly punishment of 9 regions. This was also the reason why Little 9 hid silently when Wuxia came. Therefore, the power of the heavenly punishment was directly related to the level of the world. It could easily destroy cultivators of the same level as the world, but it could also suppress existences of a higher level than the existing world. Lu Yi had talked to Little 9 about this before, so he naturally knew about it. However, it did not mean that every domain had a heavenly punishment. Heavenly punishment was related to the will of the world. If the will of the world was clear enough, there would definitely be a heavenly punishment. If it was not clear enough, there would not be a heavenly punishment. Basically, the proportion of domains with heavenly punishment was not large. It was about 10 to 20%. The distance between 9 regions and the other domain is not far. If there is a constellation realm cultivator on the other side, he should have discovered 9 regions long ago. Therefore, the other side should at most be a medium-sized domain. Even if there is a heavenly punishment, it will not be too powerful. I will go over to check the situation. At the very least, I can escape. Jian Guhong said. He had the confidence to do so. No one argued with him. Since they had made a decision, they would not hesitate. Under everyone's gaze, Jian Guhong flew towards the vortex at the center of the formation. The others waited quietly. They were not too worried about his safety because what Jian Guhong said just now was very reasonable. The other side was very likely a medium-sized domain. Even if there was a heavenly punishment, it would not be a fatal threat to him. Lu Yi secretly contacted Little 9. Is this kind of teleportation seriously exhausting the foundation of 9 regions? The energy consumed by teleportation was directly related to 2 factors: the distance and the cultivation level of the person teleporting. The teleportation between domains was undoubtedly very far. Jian Guhong was also a constellation realm cultivator. It could be said that he was the strongest battle force in 9 regions. This teleportation was a clear example of the problem of energy consumption. There should not be any consumption. This is not teleportation through the Tianji pillar. Although this formation is set up in 9 regions, the consumption is actually from other forces. Didn't Yang Qing say just now that Wuxia had left nodes in the stars between the 2 domains? These nodes were not only used for guidance, but also had the effect of gathering starry sky energy. He wanted to increase the foundation of 9 regions as soon as possible. Naturally, he would not do anything that would cause the foundation of 9 regions to disappear. Lu Yi understood. It had to be said that although Wuxia was a little unlucky, he still considered things very thoroughly. Please enter embark to view the latest update. Chapter 1209. Everything Wuxia did was to improve the foundation of the 9 states as soon as possible to meet his needs. Therefore, in this process, he would try his best to avoid unnecessary waste. This was probably his original intention for setting up those nodes. Perhaps even without those nodes, the array formation of the 9 states could directly lead to the opposite realm. It had to be said that Wuxia's attainments in array formation were indeed several streets ahead of the cultivators of the 9 states. Under everyone's gaze, Jian Guhong came to the vortex in the center of the array formation and crashed into it. Then, he was directly bounced back. This scene was as if an invisible beast swallowed him and spat him out. Everyone was stunned by what they saw. Jian Guhong obviously didn't expect this to happen, so he tried again. The result was the same. After rushing into the vortex, he was bounced back again. The requirements of the constellation realm were very unbearable. I'll go take a look. A voice sounded. It was Feng Wujiang. If a divine ocean realm cultivator really came out, then he was the best candidate. Because in the divine ocean realm, his strength was already at the peak. He was a top-notch existence. In the entire 9 continents, it was impossible for anyone to be stronger than him. He was already qualified to ascend to the constellation realm. If he wanted, the first person to step into the starry sky would not be Jian Guhong. It was just that because he wanted Pap Yang, he didn't participate in the previous fight. Everyone was a little hesitant and said, "Let's think about it at length." Someone suggested, "If it doesn't work, let's just destroy this array formation." If they really wanted to investigate the situation in the opposite realm, there were other methods. Now that there were so many constellation realm cultivators in the 9 states, even if they used the stupidest method and searched the entire starry sky, it wouldn't take long to find it. They were all worried that Feng Wujiang wouldn't return. After all, there was no need to try again. His sword light turned and flew back. Everyone went up. Wu Chang asked, "What's the situation?" Jian Guhong shook his head. "There's an invisible barrier blocking my teleportation." Everyone was dumbfounded. Yang Qing clearly said that this was a teleportation array. Why was there an invisible barrier? Was there a problem somewhere? Or did Yang Qing not understand? Or was it that he knew but didn't explain? However, considering Yang Qing's attainments in the array Dao, it was very likely that he did not understand either. Jian Guhong continued, "It's a strange feeling, but it seems to have something to do with my cultivation. The formation here can't transport cultivators in the constellation realm. Maybe we can let cultivators in the divine sea realm try." That feeling was indescribable. Only those who had personally experienced it could understand it. There was no concrete evidence. Here came the problem. It was because they were worried about the power of divine punishment that they sent constellation realm warriors to check it out. The divine sea realm warriors were not sure. But now, the teleportation of this great array was actually unable to satisfy Xing. This was a long-distance teleportation that left a deep impression on him. It reminded him of the teleportation effect of the teleportation array he had set up when his cultivation was not high. And this time, it was much more effective than before. Lu Yi felt a strong pressure pressing down on him from all directions. It didn't feel like he was in the middle of a teleportation. Instead, it felt like he had entered the intestines of a creature. He immediately understood that the array formation that Wuxia had the 9 prefectures set up was not for teleportation. Teleportation was just an additional function. Devouring was the true essence of the array formation. Throughout the entire process, he could not move his mind or see anything. In terms of the experience of teleportation alone, it was a world of difference compared to the teleportation of the Tianji pillar. After an unknown period of time, just when Lu Yi thought he was going to be in this state forever, a faint light suddenly appeared in front of him. The light rapidly expanded in his field of vision. Then Lu Yi involuntarily rushed out. Although he was dizzy and uncomfortable, he immediately activated his spiritual power to protect himself. Layer after layer of defensive spiritual tattoos were added to his body. Now that his younger brother had grown up, it was time to take some responsibility. As for divine punishment, although he had brought it up, he was actually not very worried. Yang Qing had been to that realm. If there really was divine punishment in that realm, he would not have said anything, and just watched the cultivators of the 9 prefectures go to their deaths. So since he wanted a divine sea realm warrior to check it out, then he would do it. He did not want to be in the limelight. Right now, he did not need to be in the limelight in the 9 prefectures. It was just that this matter was here. Jing, the most suitable candidate, was him. It was not appropriate to destroy the array formation, not to mention the huge cost of the initial arrangement. Just the fact that this array formation could allow Little Nine to devour the foundation of the opposite realm meant that it could not be destroyed like this. Maybe the 9 prefectures could use this to grow quickly. It was even more impossible to leave it alone. Teleportation was generally two-way. If someone from the 9 prefectures could go over, someone from the other side could come over. So it was necessary to investigate the situation on the other side. He went straight to the vortex and without any hesitation crashed into it. The sky and earth were spinning, and the universe was upside down. It was not good to take risks. Wu Chang shouted. Lu Yi, what do you think we should do? Actually, it's not that I want Lu Yi to come up with any rules. It's just that everyone knows that Lu Yi is the one who is most familiar with the secrets of the heavens. And the secrets of the 9 prefectures are unpredictable. Therefore Lu Yi could always know things that others did not. He turned his head and looked around, but there was no trace of Lu Yi. Wu Chang could not help but feel strange. Where is he? He was standing here just now. Over there. Someone was looking in a direction. It was the vortex at the center of the array. Lu Yi had actually arrived here at some unknown time. He naturally did not have the ability to appear and disappear unpredictably under the eyes of a group of Constellation Realm cultivators. But he could do it with the help of Little Nine's concealment. If eldest senior brother was the first candidate to explore the opposite realm, then he was the second. Therefore, when he heard Jian Guhong say that the teleportation was related to cultivation, he asked Little Nine to conceal his whereabouts and rushed over here. In the blood refinement realm, eldest senior brother had already done enough. He could not let eldest senior brother take the lead for everything. This junior brother, had a careful temperament. He knew that he had to conceal the arrangements here. So he opened up such a space in the depths of the earth. The surrounding light came from a kind of strange stone. It was like specks of starlight adorning the circular dome, illuminating the entire space in a hazy and dense manner. Lu Yi landed on the ground and inspected the array formation in this place. He discovered that this array was the same as the one the cultivators of the 9 provinces had set up on the leaving plains, but the scale was many times smaller. Perhaps it was the manifestation of Yu Xian's profound attainments in the Tao of formations, or perhaps it was his intention. He slightly calmed the chaotic spiritual power in his body and began to place spirit stones on this array. Previously, when Yang Qing activated the array on the leaving plains, he had directly used his own powerful strength. He had poured his own strength into the array to activate it. Although Lu Yi could also do it, in this unfamiliar place, it was best to conserve his strength as much as possible. He wanted to first test whether this array, before him, could display the effects of teleportation. Only then would he be able to determine his future course of action. It was easy to come, but if he could not return, then it would be a tragedy. Although he had determined that there was basically no risk of heavenly punishment in this new realm, he had to be prepared for all eventualities. There was nothing wrong with being careful. Well, there was indeed no heavenly punishment, because if there was, it would have descended at the first moment. However, Lu Yi had a feeling that his cultivation was being suppressed. This kind of suppression was very obvious and very familiar. He had experienced this before. Therefore, Lu Yi immediately knew where he was. This was deep underground suppressing him. It was an omnipotent force. However, because it was not too deep, and because his cultivation was suppressed, he could still unleash the power of the divine sea realm, the power of heavenly punishment. Only after calming his mind did he have the time to size up his surroundings. He was indeed underground. It was a huge, dry, circular space. The surrounding rock walls were smooth and flat, and there was still a faint trace of a powerful aura. This was artificially created. It must be Wuxian's doing. At that time, he might have to wait for the constellation realms of the 9 provinces to search for him. Logically speaking, there should be no problem. A moment later, Lu Yi activated his spiritual power, activated the array, and felt it with his heart. There was no need to completely activate it, nor did he need to really teleport back. During this process, he could already make a clear judgment. After a while, Lu Yi understood. The array could operate, and teleporting back to the 9 provinces would not be a problem. Then, the next thing to do was to simply investigate the situation of this realm. What could be confirmed was that there were living beings in this realm, but he did not know which race they were from. This was because only places with a large number of living beings could be called a realm. Those without living beings were usually called dead stars or desolate stars. Lu Yi had encountered several races so far. Other than the human race, the ones he had the most contact with were the blood race and the insect race. The starry sky was vast, and each realm was different. The living beings born were naturally different. Not every place was a paradise for the human race. There was a passage leading up. It should be the passage to leave this place. Lu Yi leaped up and went straight up. The passage was straight, and there was no need to turn. After flying for a while, he saw a bright light in the distance. Facing the light, he quickly rushed out and immediately activated the concealment and aura concealment spirit tattoos to enhance himself. Then, he discovered that at the end of the passage was an ancient well that had long dried up. He turned his head and looked around. What entered his eyes was a ruin. He quietly spread out his spiritual force. Within a radius of dozens of kilometers, there was no aura of living beings. This was to be expected. Wuxian was rather cautious in his actions. He had set up the array formation deep underground, and the entrance was in an ancient well. The location he had chosen was definitely extremely remote, a place where few living beings could be found. As such, Lu Yi naturally could not detect the aura of living beings. He leaped into the air and looked down. His brows furrowed slightly. Among the ruins, there were dilapidated walls and many dilapidated pavilions that had been abandoned for many years. Chapter 12:10. From what he could see, there were living beings living here a long time ago, and it was a large gathering point. The number of living beings living here could not be too small, but Lu Yi could not determine whether they were humans or not. He naturally did not know why it was so dilapidated. He could only explore slowly. Just as he was about to do so, he suddenly caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye. Slightly startled, he turned and rushed in that direction. Soon he arrived. In front of him was a broken wall, and something seemed to be pressed down below. He cleaned it up a little, and a dried corpse that had been buried under the ruins for an unknown number of years came into view. It was the corpse of a human. From the looks of it, there were indeed humans living in this domain. This was probably a place similar to a sect, but he did not know when it encountered a great change that led to the destruction of the sect and the extinction of its disciples. From the surface, this dead human was a male, and he was in the prime of his life. His flesh and blood were dry and gray. There were no obvious external injuries on his body. He had been dead for many years, but for some reason, his physical body was extremely intact. It was just that his flesh and blood had become withered and shriveled. Lu Yi suddenly felt that this thing was somewhat familiar. He moved closer to the corpse and sized it up with rapt attention. Without any warning, The corpse's eyes suddenly opened, and they looked at each other face to face. The eyes of the dead would become lifeless, and their eyeballs would also be turbid. But the one in front of him was clearly different. Not only were there no turbidity in his eyes, but they were also overflowing with cruelty and viciousness. If one was not mentally prepared for this sudden scene, no matter how many dead people they had seen, they would probably be shocked. Almost at the moment when the eyes opened, the corpse opened his mouth and spat out a cloud of turbid, earthy yellow breath, which covered Lu Ye's head. Then he stretched out one hand, and on his 5 fingers, sharp nails glowing with a cold light, pierced directly toward Lu Ye's chest. It was hard to believe that such a lifeless corpse would make such a violent move. But this lightning-fast attack was firmly blocked by the defensive spiritual pattern on Lu Ye's chest. The sudden flash of the saber directly cut through the corpse's neck without any hindrance. The corpse's movements froze, and the cruelty and viciousness in its eyes quickly dissipated. Soon after, it fell straight down, its head separated from its body. Perhaps it was because Lu Yi had used his spirit qi, or perhaps it was attracted by the aura he exuded. But at the same time that Lu Yi cut down the corpse, a series of noises came from the surrounding ruins, accompanied by low growls that sounded like the growls of injured beasts. Lifeless figures dashed out from all over the place. Like sharks smelling blood, they swarmed in Lu Ye's direction. Lu Yi remained motionless as he brandished the mountain plate saber in his hand. In an instant, saber light flashed with him as the center, and severed limbs and corpses flew everywhere. There were zombies with shriveled bodies and rotting corpses charging at him. The only difference was that the zombies were fighting on their own, while the rotting corpses were fighting in groups. Dense corpse energy intertwined, and soon, the large ruins were shrouded in a cloud of corpse energy. Lu Ye's saber light was swift and fierce, and no one could withstand it. With his current strength, it could be said that he was almost unstoppable in an ordinary mid-level domain. But he soon found the problem, and that was the more he killed, the more corpses gathered. These corpses had been sleeping in the ruins for who knew how many years. His arrival was like a grain of salt in a pot of hot oil, triggering an extremely violent reaction. Not only were the corpses in the ruins rushing in his direction without fear of death, but the sounds of fighting were also spreading. Instead of falling into a ball, it continued to radiate outwards from Fu Shi. There was no end to it. Lu Yi understood that continuing to kill like this was not a solution. The saber light changed direction, and he no longer defended himself. Instead, he soared into the sky and charged out. A large number of zombies and rotting corpses chased after him. But how could they catch up? Lu Yi did not fly high, because he wanted to verify some conjectures in his heart. He had to make some movements. The powerful aura he emitted was the best catalyst. Sure enough, wherever he passed, the seemingly calm area could be swept up by a storm. The corpses that had been dormant for who knew how many years were all startled, and joined the ranks of the pursuers. There was always a large number of pursuers behind him. The more movements he made, the more pursuers would be alarmed. Everywhere he went, the situation was the same. Lu Ye's heart was heavy. The corpse race. To him, this was not an unfamiliar existence. He had once interacted with this race on the broken Wushuang continent. However, among the corpse race he had come into contact with before, the strongest corpse king was only at the peak stage of the Cloud River tier. But in this realm, corpse race with strength comparable to the True Lake and Divine Sea tier could be found everywhere. This was obviously the result of the difference in the level of the world. What made his heart heavy was that the corpse race was not born and bred. This race was different from the blood race. They were usually transformed from humans after they died. The number of corpse race he encountered at this moment was equal to the number of humans who had died. This realm was once dominated by humans, but now it was the world of the corpse race. Because Lu Yi flew all the way here, he did not see half a living person. He didn't even see its shadow. What he encountered was the endless corpse race. This was undoubtedly a very sorrowful situation. If there was a possibility of reconciliation between humans and blood race, then there was an irreconcilable conflict between the corpse race and humans, or even between the corpse race and any other living beings. because the transformation of the corpse race required the sacrifice of other living beings. Take the broken Wuxia continent, for example. If it were not for the divine soldiers of Lu Yi and the others descending from the heavens, and the support of the cultivators of the 9 provinces, sooner or later, the people there would have been slaughtered to the last, and all of them would have been transformed into the corpse race. The corpse race chasing, after Lu Yi had never stopped. There were corpse race transformed from humans after they died, and there were also corpse race transformed from demonic beasts after they died. They had been hibernating in this realm for an unknown number of years. Lu Yi's arrival completely broke the peace here. Only when there was no fighting would the corpse race hibernate. In other words, there had been no fighting here for many years. This was undoubtedly a very bad result. Because there was no fighting, it meant that there was no resistance, which meant that the living beings of this realm were very likely to have died out. At the very least, in the area that Lu Yi had explored, the living beings had been extinct for many years. This place was very likely another fragment of the Wuxia continent, or even the main body of the Wuxia continent. The reason for this judgment was naturally because of the corpse race. The broken Wuxia continent that Lu Yi had gone to had corpse race, and there were also corpse race here. There was a very high possibility that there was some connection between them. That broken Wuxia continent was only a fragment of the realm capital, so it could only nurture cultivators of the Cloud River tier. Since there was a fragment, there was naturally a main body. The distance could also support this deduction. After the cultivators of the 9 states rescued the broken Wuxia continent, that fragment of the realm had merged with the Cloud River battlefield after a period of time. In other words, that fragment was very close to the 9 states at that time. And now, although the realm that Lu Yi was in was not close to the 9 states, it was not too far away, either. That was why Wuxian could easily find it and leave some arrangements here. Presumably, the Wuxia continent had been broken by some unknown encounter, and the fragment was where Pang Huanin was born. It was drifting in the starry sky, and it was found by Little Nine, who then captured it. The main body was still here. There was no way to confirm whether this guess was true or not, unless he explored the entire realm. Lu Yi spent less than half a day exploring the realm within a radius of 50,000 kilometers, but he still did not see a single living being. Everywhere he passed, there was always an endless stream of corpse race. There was no need to continue exploring. Perhaps there were still living beings in this realm, but they were definitely not in this location. Moreover, from the general environment that he had explored, even if there were still living beings in this realm, it would be extremely difficult for them to survive. Lu Yi's figure rose into the air, and his speed instantly increased as well. The corpse race that was chasing behind him quickly lost track of him. He naturally had the ability to kill all of the pursuers, but that was meaningless and would only be a waste of time and energy. His mission this time was to explore this realm. Now that he had a rough understanding of it, he naturally did not want to waste any more time to avoid worrying the 9 states. After getting rid of the pursuers, he immediately activated the hidden regiment and breath control to strengthen himself, and then quietly headed back. Pairs of eyes looked over, and seeing that he had returned safely, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, if Lu Yi really did not return, then the Constellation Realm cultivators would really have to search the entire starry sky for him. Although they would definitely find him, it would definitely take a lot of time. You've worked hard. What's the situation there? Jian Guhong asked. Maybe the Wuxia continent. The corpse race is rampant, and there is no life there. The Wuxia continent. Corpse race? The group of Constellation Realm cultivators were all stunned. Chapter 12:11. When Lu Yi and the rest were messing around on the broken Wuxia continent, Jian Guhong and the rest were still in the blood-refining realm's Jade Blood Sacred Land. Ing Wuji and some true Lake Realm cultivators were surprised. Like Lu Yi, they had participated in the encirclement of the Wuxia continent's corpse race. They had a deep impression of this place. In the current Cloud River battlefield, there was a large area that belonged to the broken Wuxia continent. The terrain had not changed much, Facing the puzzled gazes of the Constellation Realm cultivators, Lu Yi briefly explained his actions. Everyone understood. Feng Wujiang said, "If Junior Brother's conjecture is correct, then the realm on the other side should be the main body of the Wushuang continent. That's why the corpse race is rampant, and there are no living creatures? If my conjecture is correct, that's naturally the case. But I can't be sure if it's the Wushuang continent. Anyway, I didn't find any traces of living creatures in the area I explored. The news wasn't good because the human race on the other side might have been extinct. But it wasn't bad either. If it came, Little Nine could devour the resources of the other side to strengthen itself. Of course, this would have to wait until it devoured Yuandong. There was no reason for it to leave the fatty meat at home and stare at a realm thousands of miles away. When the 9 prefectures' resources gradually strengthened, the devouring speed would also become faster and more efficient. What arrangements did Yu Xian make over there? Feng Wujiang asked. Lu Yi explained what he saw over there, especially Yu Xian's careful arrangements. Everyone understood. Jian Guhong said, "From the looks of it, the corpse race is unlikely. Therefore, even if we don't care about it, the other side won't be much of a hindrance to the 9 prefectures." The reason why they wanted to explore the other side was because they were afraid that Yu Xian's arrangements would bring some unpredictable disaster to the 9 prefectures. Now that they knew there were no living creatures over there, only a group of corpse race, they naturally didn't have to worry too much. Even if the corpse race accidentally discovered the arrangements left behind by Yu Xian, there was a high chance that they wouldn't be able to activate the teleportation array. The most likely thing they would do after coming to the 9 prefectures was to destroy the array unconsciously and break the connection between the 2 realms. The teleportation channel. If that was the case, then the possibility of the corpse race coming to the 9 prefectures would be completely cut off. "I have an idea," Pang Jin suddenly said. Longbow smiled. "What a coincidence, I have an idea too." The 2 of them were not the only ones who had such thoughts. Most of the cultivators present also had such thoughts. "Old Pang, what do you think? Tell me." Due to various reasons, most of the true lake and spirit ocean cultivators had nowhere to vent their energy within the 9 continents. They needed more battle merits for their cultivation, but their monthly salary was insufficient. The cultivation method of drawing on the heaven's secrets, which was unique to those above the true lake stage, was not efficient enough. Therefore, if there was a place where cultivators above the true lake stage could vent their excess energy and gain battle merits at the same time, it would undoubtedly be a popular choice. The appearance of the Wushuang continent's domain was just right. From this point, the 9 prefectures really had to thank Yu Xian. They had to erect a monument for him. It was also at this moment that Lu Yi suddenly realized what Yang Qing meant when he said that Yu Xian had sent a huge gift to the 9 prefectures. Yang Qing's attainments in array Dao were not high, so he did not realize that Yu Xian's arrangement was mainly for the 9 prefectures to devour the foundation of the Wushuang continent. However, he had been suppressed in the 9 prefectures for 10,000 years. He knew the cultivation and survival methods of the 9 prefectures like the back of his hand. Naturally, he knew what choice the 9 prefectures would make once the Wushuang continent entered the eyes of the 9 prefectures' cultivators. They were all people who had cultivated for many years. There were many things that did not need to be pointed out. Once Pang Jin started, everyone knew what he was thinking. It coincided with the thoughts of the majority. If that's the case, then the Wushuang continent is indeed a treasure land. The corpse race that was spread all over the Wushuang continent were mobile battle merits that the 9 prefectures' cultivators desired. The battle of the blood refinement realm was fought too quickly. In just a few months, the blood race was exterminated. Even though the 9 prefectures' cultivators who participated in the battle earned a lot, it was still a one-time deal. The Wushuang continent was an undeveloped place. It was probably enough for the 9 prefectures' cultivators to torment. Although it is a land of treasures, it is not a place that can be plundered continuously. As Lu Yi said, the corpse clan is transformed from other creatures. They do not have the ability to reproduce, so killing one means one less. One day, the corpse clan will be exterminated. Indeed, but it should be able to last for a long time. It may be decades or hundreds of years or even longer. The reason why the Battle of the Blood Refinement Realm was won so smoothly was mainly because Lu Yi restrained all the Saint Seeds, Jian Guhong, and a large group of Ninth Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators also contributed. However, these people did not need battle merits, so if they really wanted to cause trouble on the Wuxia continent, they would not be mobilized. Only true Lake Realm cultivators, and some Divine Sea Realm cultivators, who needed battle merits would be mobilized. Moreover, in the Battle of the Blood Refinement Realm, a large number of Cloud River Realm cultivators participated. On the Wuxia continent, Cloud River Realm cultivators would not participate. They could do whatever they wanted. In this way, in terms of numbers and strength, they were far inferior to the expedition to the Blood Refinement Realm. It would take a long time to rely on this group of people to clean up the entire Wuxia continent. At the very least, during this period, the focus of the conflicts above the true Lake Realm would be shifted to the outside world, and there would be no more internal problems. As for decades or hundreds of years later, perhaps by then, the foundation of the 9 continents would increase greatly, and cultivation would become easier. What would the cultivators' desire for battle merits change? There was no way to predict what would happen in such a long time. Right now they could only take one step at a time. We need the cooperation of the 9 continents. Tianji. As Longbow spoke, he looked at Lu Yi and grinned. Is there a problem? The overall calculation of battle merits had always been operated by Tianji. The Wuxia continent was not the 9 continents, so if they really wanted to conquer the Wuxia continent, the cooperation of Tianji was indispensable. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and nodded. No problem. It was nothing more than sending a few Tianji pillars over. As long as the cultivators were within the range of the Tianji pillars, they would be able to obtain the corresponding battle merits by killing the corpse race. Then it's settled. Jian Guhong looked around. No one had any objections. Although they had all advanced to the constellation realm, they were still from the 9 continents. It was impossible for them to be indifferent to the future of the 9 continents. If they really did not care, they would not have returned when they knew that the 9 continents had been invaded by experts. With their current ability to traverse the starry sky, they could have run far away. They believed that Wuxia would not chase after them one by one. It was precisely because they cared about the 9 continents that they ran back the moment they received the news. None of them were left behind. After the discussion was settled, they immediately began to prepare. Since they wanted to use the corpse race on the Wuxia continent as a source of battle merits, the first thing they had to do was naturally to establish a stronghold on the Wuxia continent. Only then would it be convenient for the 9 continents cultivators to travel. There was no way to choose the location of the stronghold. They could only choose the ruins where the exit of the passage was located. This was reasonable because the stronghold not only had to ensure the safety of the 9 continents cultivators, but it also had to guard the transportation passage, so that the corpse race would not accidentally bump into it and destroy it. Therefore, the first batch of cultivators to go over had to be capable of fighting. Only then would they be able to resist the corpse race's attack, before the stronghold was established. Lu Yi was selected without a doubt. He had investigated the situation on the other side, so he had a slightly better understanding of the situation there. Moreover, something like the cooperation of Tianji would have to be done by him. Feng Wujiang was also among them. He had not advanced to the constellation realm for the time being. He had enough reputation and strength. If there was a need for an expert to oversee the stronghold, then it would be none other than him. Chapter 12:12. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Tanjia's experience would be experienced a second time in such a short period of time. Seeing this, the morale of the cultivators who were eager for battle merits was boosted. They were ready to go, and they thought maliciously in their hearts. Who knew what kind of scene it would be after they had personally experienced it? Originally, many people had gathered at the Li Plains to set up the Great Array. Most of them had dabbled in array Dao, or were proficient in array Dao. The first group was still this group of people, because if they wanted to build a reliable stronghold, they had to be protected by many great arrays. Of course, this matter was not forced. It was all voluntary. As expected, no one retreated at this time. Everyone wanted to participate in this operation. All of them had experienced the battle of the blood-refining world and reaped enough benefits from it. Now that they had another chance to go on an expedition to another world, naturally, none of them would want to miss it, especially the true lake stage and spirit sea stage cultivators. For a long time to come, the Wuxia continent would be their battlefield. Moreover, for the corpse race, killing one meant there would be one less of them. Naturally, it was first come, first serve. Lu Yi took the lead. Before they set out, people from the Tianji Business Alliance had already sent over a few Tianji pillars under Little Nine's secret orders. What Lu Yi needed to do was to find a suitable location and place these Heaven's Fate pillars. When the time came, cultivators who killed corpse race cultivators within the range of these Heaven's Fate pillars would be able to obtain merit records. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Yi once again crashed into that solid vortex. Next was Feng Wujiang, followed by a group of Spirit Ocean Realm cultivators. After the Spirit Ocean Realm cultivators all passed through, it was time for the True Lake Realm and Cloud River Realm cultivators. In the circular space deep underground, one figure after another appeared. Other than Lu Yi, who was already mentally prepared and had a calm expression, even people like eldest senior brother's face turned slightly pale. There were even people who swayed left and right after appearing embarrassed. To the cultivators of the 9 prefectures, the most common method of teleportation was to borrow the power of Tianji's teleportation. The entire process was smooth and smooth. Even when they were teleported from the 9 prefectures to the blood-refining realm, it was the same. There was no uncomfortable experience at all. However, the teleportation this time had absolutely nothing to do with being smooth and smooth. Not only did the entire process feel very long, it really felt like he had been swallowed into the stomach of some exotic beast and was being transported through the intestines of that beast. Many warriors at the Spirit Sea realm felt uncomfortable, and at the same time, they also felt that Lu Yi was too mean. It was such a terrible experience, but he didn't warn them before. Obviously, he had the mentality of tearing other people's umbrellas apart, even if he had been drenched in the rain. But very soon, they no longer felt uncomfortable, because the true lake stage cultivators, who followed closely behind, performed even worse. As soon as they appeared, they rushed to the side and vomited. The old fellows quietly watched this scene, their minds much more balanced. Lu Yi took the lead and flew up the passageway. Everyone followed closely behind. Soon, they rushed out of the dried-up ancient well and arrived above the ruins. A warrior at the Spirit Sea realm spread out his psychic power and found something. He dashed towards a direction. When he came back, he was carrying a zombie with sharp teeth and claws. The zombie's strength wasn't low. It was at the true lake stage. However, under the restraint of the Spirit Sea realm, it was like an enraged mad dog. No matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't break free. So this is the corpse race. Many Spirit Sea realm cultivators looked over in amazement. They felt that the universe was vast and full of strange things. The blood race in the blood refinement realm was already an eye-opener for them. But the blood race was still alive. When they were cut, they would cry out in pain. When they were killed, they would bleed. These corpse race members were clearly dead, but they could still move like living people. This was very strange. To be honest, if they hadn't heard Lu Yi talk about the characteristics of this race, they wouldn't have paid much attention to it even if they saw it lying on the ground. They would have thought that it was a corpse that had been dead for many years. A large group of Spirit Sea realm cultivators watched with great interest. Those who couldn't squeeze in had already been mobilized to study it. The corpse race members in the ruins had basically been lured away by Lu Yi. Only a few small cats and dogs were left, and they were all quickly caught. The true lake stage cultivators who had rushed over later watched as the corpse race changed. Turning into water, they were completely unaware of this moment. Groups of people gathered together to discuss and comment on each other's appearance. From time to time, roars could be heard from these people. Feng Wujiang was a little helpless. He said to Lu Yi, "If junior apprentice brother has the time, it's best to imprint the various characteristics and information of the corpse race into a jade slip. When the time comes, it will spread the information of the corpse race to the cultivators from the 9 continents. This will also let them be on guard." Lu Yi nodded. That's not a problem. He had also thought of this matter. The cultivators from the 9 continents came here to kill the corpse race and obtain battle merits. If they were really killed by the corpse race because of their lack of strength, then there was nothing they could do. If their skills were inferior, then they would willingly admit defeat. But if they suffered casualties because of unfavorable information, then it would be an unnecessary loss. There were still many things to pay attention to when dealing with the corpse race. First was the problem of corpse poison. Every corpse race member had corpse poison. Once this thing entered the body of a cultivator, it was a very troublesome matter. It required a special antidote pill, or the help of a medical cultivator to expel it. It was very difficult to cleanse it completely with just the cultivator's own strength. But once the corpse poison accumulated too much in the body, the cultivator would inevitably transform into a corpse race member. Moreover, in terms of type, the corpse race was divided into 2 types, zombies and rotting corpses. The former was basically equivalent to the body cultivator of the human race. Generally, they were the type that fought alone. Rotting corpses were a little more troublesome. They had some traces of magic cultivation and beast taming schools. However, they did not control any demonic beasts, but the same kind of corpse race. Moreover, most of the corpse race did not have intelligence and only knew how to act based on instinct. However, some of the corpse race did have intelligence. Other than their physical characteristics being slightly different from the human race, they were basically no different from the human race. Lu Yi had already discovered this when he was searching the surrounding area. Among the corpses that were chasing him, there were many corpses that displayed high intelligence. If he wasn't fast enough, he would have been surrounded and chased down. All of these were things that the cultivators needed to pay attention to when dealing with the corpse race. The cultivators of the 9 continents came here because those who killed the corpse race were not there to add more people to the corpse race. Also, the group of Divine Sea Realm cultivators studied the corpse race for a while. They did not forget about the proper business. Apart from 2 of the captured corpse race members who were killed as a test, the others were all imprisoned in place by the group's methods. They were not kept for viewing, but mainly left here to let the cultivators of the 9 continents see for themselves what the corpse race was like. The group of True Lake Realm and Divine Sea Realm cultivators began to clean up the ruins, preparing to build the first stronghold of the 9 continents here. Fortunately, the commotion caused by Lu Ye's arrival had attracted the nearby corpse race away, so the whole process was not disturbed too much. Occasionally, some corpse race members who wandered into this place by mistake were quickly killed. While they were busy here, in the 9 continents, the news about the Peerless Continent and the corpse race was also rapidly spreading. In the 9 continents, the True Lake Realm and Divine Sea Realm cultivators, who had long been unable to endure the thirst rush towards Li Yuan. Even some Cloud River Realm cultivators, who heard the commotion, were eager to move. In the end, they were unceremoniously stopped by the True Lake Realm cultivators of their own sections. According to the True Lake Realm cultivators, the Cloud River Realm cultivators would go to the Cloud River battlefield to cause trouble. Right now, the 9 continents had finally found a place suitable for True Lake Realm and Divine Sea Realm cultivators to display their strength. Who knew how long it would last? So why would the Cloud River Realm cultivators come to snatch it? There was only so much fat meat, and the more a Cloud River Realm cultivator ate, the less a Cloud River Realm cultivator would eat. In terms of the attitude of this matter, all the sects in the 9 continents that received accurate information made the same response. They forbade their Cloud River Realm cultivators from setting foot in Li Yuan, and even more so, did not allow them to enter the Peerless Continent. It had to be said that in terms of cognition and handling of certain matters, cultivators had a natural affinity. At the same time, in the 9 continents, The spirit light from the heavens that had stopped for more than 2 months started again. Previously, Little Nine was hiding from Wuxia, not daring to show himself easily, so this opportunity for the Ninth Order Divine Sea Realm to break through the shackles could only be temporarily suspended. Now that Wuxia was dead, the opportunity naturally had to continue. The number of Constellation Realm cultivators born in the 9 continents slowly increased. Most people once again embarked on the path to explore the starry sky. Firstly, they were searching for spirit jades for cultivation. Secondly, they were searching for the location of the peerless continent in the starry sky. The Constellation Realm cultivators had no way of entering the peerless continent through the transmission channel, so they could only rely on flying. Although the starry sky was vast and without a target, and it would be very difficult to search like this, who knew, they might be able to find it? It was not to say that they wanted to do anything to the corpse race of the peerless continent. Even if they wanted to, the true Lake Realm and Spirit Sea Realm cultivators of the 9 continents would not agree. Even the Cloud River Realm cultivators were not allowed to set foot in Liyuan, for fear that they would snatch something away, let alone the Constellation Realm cultivators above the Spirit Sea Realm. However, at the very least, they had to figure out the specific location of the peerless continent. Moreover, this kind of search was only an incidental part of the process of searching for spirit jades, and was not the main goal, so it could not be said to be a waste of time and energy. Only a small portion of the Constellation Realm cultivators, led by Jian Guhong, stayed behind. They had no choice but to stay behind, because there was still Yangqing in the 9 continents. Before they completely understood Yangqing's attitude towards the 9 continents, the Constellation Realm cultivators were not at ease to leave. Although in the face of an absolute gap in strength, there was no use for them to stay behind. At the very least, they could live and die together with the 9 continents. There were not many Constellation Realm cultivators who stayed behind, only 5 or 6. They were thinking of a way to find traces of Yangqing, and were prepared to have an open and honest discussion with him. But after searching here and there was no trace of Yangqing. It was as if such a supreme elite had disappeared into thin air. Thus, everyone knew that Yangqing was unwilling to see them. Otherwise, with his ability, there was probably no one in the whole 9 continents who could hide from his perception if there was any movement. There was nothing that could be done about this. Thinking it over, they were afraid that there would only be a chance if Lu Yi made an appearance. No matter what, there was still a favor between Lu Yi and Yangqing that had helped him escape. Previously, it was also Yangqing who had transmitted sound to Lu Yi about the formation on the Liyuan. If others could not find it, perhaps Lu Yi could? 1. Chapter 12-13. Lu Yi had long wanted to talk to Yangqing again, but after Wuxian's death, he went to the Wushuang continent and had not been free. Now that the stronghold on the Wushuang continent had been built, and the few Tianji pillars that he brought over had been placed in suitable positions, there was basically nothing for him to do here. Other cultivators might be lacking in battle merits, but he was not. His accumulated battle merits had long exceeded 7 digits. He dared not say that no one would be able to surpass him in the future, but it was definitely unprecedented. Therefore, after receiving the news, he immediately returned to the 9 states from the Wushuang continent. The Tian continent was one of the 9 major continents of the 9 states. Although it was named Tian, it was not much different from the other continents. It did not mean that the entire 9 states was centered on it. For those mortals who did not know much, the saying that the sky was round and the earth was round might be deeply rooted in people's hearts, and even many cultivators with low cultivation levels thought so. However, the 9 states was actually a sphere. This was something that Lu Yi saw clearly in the starry sky. For such a spherical planet, any place could be the center, so there was no such thing as a center. Lu Yi arrived at the Tian continent through the teleportation of the Tianji pillar. Somewhere in the direction of the Tianji Chamber of Commerce, he leaped up and sped all the way. Although he had returned from the blood-refining realm, Little Nine still maintained his right to teleport the Tianji pillar, which was the only preferential treatment he could get from little Nine at this stage. Half a day later, he arrived at a spiritual peak. From the map, this spiritual peak belonged to a Tianyun clan, but it was not part of the clan's foundation, and could barely be considered as the clan's sphere of influence. Just like Mount Tunshan to the Jade Blood Sect. In theory, the entire Mount Tunshan belonged to the Jade Blood Sect, but in reality, the Jade Blood Sect's foundation was only a few spiritual peaks, or perhaps more, but there was no way to include the entire Fragrant Mountain for the time being. The spiritual peak was nameless, and compared to the other spiritual peaks nearby, there was nothing special about it. Originally, this place was deserted, and even the cultivators of the Tianyun clan would not deliberately come to such a place. At most, they would just pass by. However, just a while ago, the cultivators of the Tianyuan clan, who passed by, were surprised to find that there was a small wooden house on the spiritual peak, and there were cultivators coming and going. The Tianyun clan naturally would not leave it alone, and sent cultivators to check and confirm that it was an itinerant cultivator of the Cloud River realm who had settled here. The sects of the 9 prefectures, big and small, treated the loose cultivators as a group. His attitude wasn't that of a representative of the capital, so he didn't make things difficult for him. After all, he was just a Cloud River tier cultivator. Since they had taken a fancy to this nameless spiritual mountain, it was common for them to stay here. However, they were warned not to commit any crimes, and not to disturb the lives of the mortals nearby. Naturally, the young man agreed and settled down here. When Lu Yi arrived, he immediately saw a figure dressed in green, leisurely lying on a self-made recliner under the shade of a tree, leisurely enjoying the cool air. Next to him was a snow-white rabbit, its eyes brimming with tears as it looked at the late Lu Yi, its eyes full of grievances. Little Nine's voice sounded in his ear. "Lu Yi, why are you only here now?" She looked like she had been waiting for him for a long time. Lu Yi gave Yang Kai a calm look before stepping forward and bowing respectfully. "Senior Yang." The cultivators of the Heavenly Cloud capital knew that this cultivator was only at the first level of the Star Metal Arts, but they didn't know that he was the strongest warrior in the 9 provinces. Even a Sunshine Realm cultivator like Wuxia had his neck broken and his head twisted off. If they knew, they wouldn't know how to feel. Yang Qing closed his eyes to rest, as if he didn't hear anything. Lu Yi didn't mind and took out a table, a chair, and a set of tea brewing tools from his storage space. He sat down with his back facing him. The others couldn't find Yang Qing, because he had no intention of meeting them. For a powerful person like Yang Qing, if he didn't want to, no one in the 9 states could break in. Lu Yi was able to find this place only because of Little Nine's tip. However, if the other party really didn't want to see him, he could have just left. Since he stayed, it was a good start. Lu Yi's movements were meticulous as he boiled the tea. Lu Yi wasn't proficient in the way of tea, but in this situation, it didn't seem right not to order some tea. So he did. After a while, tea was served, and Lu Yi was still respectful. "Senior, please enjoy." Yang Qing opened his eyes and sat up straight. He picked up the tea and drank it in one gulp. Lu Yi was amused. This guy didn't seem to be proficient in the way of tea. Those who truly understood tea couldn't possibly understand it as well as wine. If you have something to say, then say it. If you have nothing to say, then scram. Don't disturb this seat. Yang Qing didn't have the slightest awareness of being short-mouthed. His tone wasn't polite at all. This made Lu Yi feel a sense of closeness. The person in front of him didn't seem to be a powerful dragon, but rather an extremely senior. Lu Yi eagerly filled Yang Qing's cup. Yang Qing narrowed his eyes. "Kid, do you think that I don't understand the way of tea at all?" Lu Yi was a little stunned. "What do you mean?" Yang Qing snorted coldly. "Everyone says that when the wine is full, the toast is full. People say that when the tea is full, the tea you poured for this seat is overflowing. Are you trying to drive me away?" Lu Yi looked wronged. "That's impossible. Senior just helped the 9 regions escape from the disaster. The 9 regions can't even thank you enough. How can we chase Senior away?" Junior was just about to suggest to the major sects to set up a long life memorial tablet for Senior. Morning and evening, 3 kowtows in the morning and evening. Generations will revere you, and your descendants will worship you. Yang Qing looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Do you know that the dragon race has an innate divine ability? That is, we can distinguish whether a person's words are true or false. Lu Yi looked at him calmly. Junior's words come from the bottom of my heart. Every word is sincere. There is no falsehood. In the end, he was still a little doubtful. Does the dragon race really have such an innate divine ability? Yang Qing said in annoyance. That's the innate divine ability of Xieji. Lu Yi knew that he had been fooled. No wonder. He was old. How would he know when he heard about it? What innate divine ability did the dragon race have? Thinking about it, he asked. What is the dragon race's innate divine ability? Yang Qing said leisurely, time. 3 time? Lu Yi was confused. What kind of innate divine ability was this? Then, he saw Yang Qing raise her hand to cover him. In that instant, Lu Yi felt as if his thoughts had slowed down by many times. Yang Qing's movements weren't fast. Instead, they seemed sluggish, but he couldn't avoid them no matter what he did. Return. This was an absolutely torturous feeling. Just think about it. If he was affected by such an innate divine ability in battle, no matter how many lives he had, it would not be enough. It seemed like an instant, but also like a long time. Only then did Lu Yi come back to his senses. His face was full of thoughts. His expression was solemn. Senior's cultivation is so profound. Junior is in awe of it. This was a sincere sentence. Moreover, Yang Qing's actions just now should not have much to do with his cultivation. That was the display of the dragon race's innate divine ability. In other words, even if Yang Qing's cultivation was the same as his, he could still make him feel that way. Changing the topic, he said, Senior is such a powerful and noble person. Isn't it too much of a grievance to live in a small place like the 9 states? It's said that dragons soar to the 9 heavens, but the 9 states is ultimately just a small pond. It's still okay to raise some fish and shrimps. Yang Qing interrupted him. In the end, you still want to chase me away. Lu Yi lied through his teeth. No, absolutely not. It's the fortune of the 9 states that Senior can oversee the 9 states. If anyone dares to chase you away, I will wring his head off. He sighed. However, Senior, you still have to consider the concerns of us small shrimps. Junior has come here for no other reason than to know Senior's attitude towards the 9 states. There was no point in beating around the bush. In the end, he could only lay it out. This was also the helplessness of the weak. If you say that you are unhappy with the misery of being suppressed for 10,000 years and want to destroy the 9 states to vent your anger, then hurry up and do it. It will save everyone from being on tenterhooks. If you care about old ties and are willing to protect the 9 states, then the billions of people in the 9 states will be deeply grateful. As for what it is, Senior has to give us a definite answer. The attitude of the 9 states was indeed not to chase Yang Qing away. Who could chase away an expert like him? It was just that everyone knew Yang Qing's attitude. Protect the 9 states? Yang Qing sneered. In your dreams. Why should I protect the 9 states for you? Previously, killing Yuexin was just a return of courtesy for letting me out. The reason why I'm still here is just to recuperate. When I'm almost fully recovered, I'll leave. So you can rest assured that I won't do anything to 9 regions. Hearing this, Lu Ye's heart that had been hanging in the air finally relaxed. Although from their previous interactions, Yang Qing did not have much malice towards the current 9 states, he could not be sure. At this moment, since he had said so, then it could not be wrong. Thinking about it, the gap between Yang Qing and the 9 states was equivalent to the gap between Lu Yi, who was in the Divine Ocean realm, and ordinary people. Would he go and bully those ordinary people at will now? Not to mention that the ideals he had always had did not allow him to do so. Even if he did, there would be no sense of accomplishment. Senior wants to recover. If there is anything the 9 states can help with, please do not hesitate to tell us. This Junior and the many cultivators of the 9 states will not shirk our duty. These were polite words. Lu Yi also knew that he could not help much. If he had advanced to the constellation realm, perhaps he could have gone to the starry sky to find some spiritual jades for Yang Qing. However, he was only in the Divine Ocean realm, and could not even set foot in the starry sky. How could he help? Saying a few beautiful words would not cause him to lose a piece of meat. Yang Qing immediately said, "If you say so, then I won't be polite." Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. Although he did not know what was going to happen, he had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. The Dragon Clan expert in front of him had probably been waiting for this moment to come to an agreement with him. Words that had been spoken were like water that had been poured out. He could only brace himself and ask, "But I wonder how this junior can help." Chapter 12:14. It doesn't make sense. Jian Guhong and the others may be able to help him a little, but what can I, a divine sea realm cultivator, do? Communicating with such an old guy who has lived for who knows how many years. It really doesn't matter if you have a few extra thoughts. In the future, I will never casually promise others anything. Lu Yi secretly remembered this in his heart. Yang Qing glanced at him up and down. Seventh order divine sea realm, a little bit worse. If I give you 10 days, it won't be a problem for you to break through to the 8th order, right? Lu Yi really wanted to say that there was a problem, but when he met Yang Qing's smiling eyes, he knew in his heart that this matter couldn't be avoided. Although Yang Qing had been in a trapped state, he was not ignorant of some things in the 9 states. Perhaps his understanding was not comprehensive enough, but he knew the general situation. Especially Lu Yi, as early as the first time they met, Yang Qing had paid attention to him. How could he not know Lu Ye's cultivation speed? Moreover, he could tell at a glance what state Lu Yi was in at the moment. Giving him 10 days was already a generous amount of time. "Senior, what do you want me to do?" Lu Yi asked worriedly. "Go to Puxing first. You will know later." Tang Qing was so fond of Jiaoche Department's Yang Tai. Returning to the main body of the tree, the east of the ocean is definitely a place that a divine sea realm cultivator can set foot in carefully. Yang Qing shook his head. Sure enough, not having an elder at home is like not having a treasure. There doesn't seem to be such a sect. Why did he get the inheritance left behind by others? Lu Yi asked. Mouth. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Why are the cultivators of the 4 states all like this? Looking for something bad, and instinctively wanting to snatch it. Strikesure was waiting for me, looking at his hands behind his back. On the small tree in Najing behind the Zhongshe line, he nodded with satisfaction. It's not wrong. Yang Tangqing suddenly thought of something. During the later 4 prefectures period, was there a sect called the Sword Instrument Sect? Lu Yi nodded. Yes. Yuing answered, planning to find an opportunity to put the artifact refining experience from Sword Tools Sect in the treasure vault. In this way, all the artifact masters in the 4 states would not exchange for it, which could also be considered as helping Sword Tools Sect. The artifact refining's artifact refining. What are we going to do? She asked. What are we going to do? To snatch the real reincarnation tree? Yang Qing didn't want to wait for her to sell everything, but after waiting for a while, she still didn't get anything. She reacted. That tree was left behind 10,000 years later? This was also the reason why 4th-year students knew that there were no spirit jades in the upper 7 and lower 8 realms. Yuing nodded. I received some of his legacy. However, in comparison, there wasn't much of a difference between the two. Yang Qing could not imagine why Lu Yi would suddenly tell her about this matter. However, the only thing I could do right now was to listen in silence. In fact, according to Yang Qing's perception, the small tree was more than 100 years old. It was small and low enough, but it was also grand and ancient enough. As if seeing through Yu Ying's doubts, Yuing explained, there are no treasures in the starry sky. They were born with the heaven and earth, and there are 7 of them. Each of them has unfathomable abilities. None of the treasures is called the reincarnation tree. Don't think too much about it. The tree behind you isn't the treasure. It's just a clone of the treasure. Basically, the realms in the starry sky don't have such a clone of the reincarnation tree. It's not only the 4 states that don't have it. The tree behind you was obtained from the reincarnation tree by the ancient ancestors of the 4 states. It was Lu Yi who said that the reincarnation tree didn't have a main body or a clone. That was to avoid reminding Yang Qing of her talent tree. Big Four said matter-of-factly. It's useless to tell him. To go to the main body of the reincarnation tree, one needs to be accompanied by a sufficiently weak person. You can't accompany him there. Lu Yi was helpless. She could only fly to a spiritual peak in the distance and cultivate quietly. As for whether or not the existence of the talent tree would be exposed, it didn't matter. The talent tree was just a relatively powerful inheritance. It might be very attractive to cultivators with low cultivation, but it was probably useless to Yang Qing. What he said made sense. It was precisely because there was something that didn't exist that the cultivators of the 4 states paid attention to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the base of a small sect outside. The remaining 7 days were used to consolidate her cultivation. She dragged it out until the 10 days were up before returning to find Lu Yi. In such a top-level realm without any children, how could the strongest sects there be any weaker? Moreover, the talent tree's cultivation had always been hidden. Ewing might not be able to discover anything. When I condensed my clone, the talent tree would form a root. Now that the entire talent tree had split into 7, could it be counted as the talent tree having a clone? One Big Four replied. Of course you know. Although the weaklings of the 4 states have all died, there was still a lot of information left behind. How come I've heard him mention this before? If Lu Yi had done it in front of me, Yang Qing probably would have known about the secrets of the reincarnation tree's clone. As for the sword Dao, I can only rely on Thought Moon Immortal. Back in the sword instrument sect, you were the one who inherited the sword Dao inheritance. Snatching the reincarnation tree. That brat really dared to think about it. Can this thing be snatched? Moreover, a mere divine ocean realm cultivator dared to talk so casually. It really made me laugh. My sword gourd doesn't have much experience in refining weapons. It wasn't brought out from the sword instrument sect's secret realm. Back then, I only knew that the sword instrument sect was an ancient sect. I didn't know which era it came from. Then withered leaves fell from the sky. The small tree that was full of vitality also withered like an old man on the verge of death. Bad appearance counted. 2 dodging was fine. Extending your head was a knife. Retracting your head was also a knife. 3 perhaps in the future, when I go to the starry sky. I won't have the chance to confirm this because the starry sky is vast enough. In the later 4 states, there were many weak cultivators in the cultivation world of the 4 states. This was an era when the name of the 4 states shook the starry sky. The 4 states were so weak that even after 10,000 years, there were still no records of them among the small races and small ancient realms in the starry sky. 10,000 years have passed. The glorious sects of the past are long gone. However, in the human emperor sect, there isn't a single ordinary thing left behind. As Lu Yi spoke, he turned around and looked at the small tree behind him. 3 as he spoke, he raised his hand and pressed it under the small tree. He knew what kind of power he was using. The small tree suddenly shook slightly. Then, the green leaves on the tree stopped turning from green to yellow. It seemed that in an instant, the reincarnation tree's clone had passed through a very young age. Now it seems that the sword instrument sect is very small. It might also be a remnant of the later 4 states. Yang Qing clicked his tongue in wonder. He looked up and down at the small tree, but he couldn't see anything ordinary. Logically speaking, since it was left behind 10,000 years later, the small tree must be extremely ancient. Moreover, after 10,000 years, the cultivators of the 4 states should have discovered that it was normal for the small tree. Back then, the human emperor of the human emperor sect saw my dragon in the starry sky and wanted to snatch me away. In the end, the 2 of them became acquainted with each other. Yang Qing said, "What does the junior need your help with? You can't say it now, right?" The feeling of not having anything to do is very bad. Since I've received the favor of the legacy, I have no obligation to help him spread the legacy. Lu Yi admonished. In this way, there was no similarity between the talent tree and the reincarnation tree. In the 4 states, even if my clone was far away, he wouldn't be able to sense anything. However, there was absolutely no limit to the distance he could sense. Yang Qing was still able to determine what the limit was for the time being. Yang Qing had broken through to the first order divine sea realm during the expedition to the blood-refining world. Before that, he had refined a small amount of saint blood. Every drop of saint blood contained a very small amount of energy. The process of refining saint blood was actually equivalent to the accumulation of one's foundation. It was just that the efficiency was not as fast as cultivating in the 4 states. The falling leaves didn't fall to the ground. Instead, they turned into a thick yellow halo that gathered and surged. Therefore, no matter how much he cultivated before returning to the 4 states, his cultivation was already close to the 4th order divine sea realm. Someone said with a bad temper, "He's going to snatch something, but he's going to snatch the reincarnation tree." Lu Yi looked at me meaningfully. "Don't worry. What you want him to do must be something he can do. If he can do it, you will only force him to do it." After spending 10 days, a total of 7 days, I still hadn't made a breakthrough. Yu Ying's eyes flashed with reminiscence. "Second, that place is the strongest sect in the 4 states after 10,000 years. It's the foundation of the sect." After a pause, I asked, "Why did you choose to cultivate outside?" The reincarnation tree's clone, no matter how far it was, could open a passage to the mainland at the end of the previous reincarnation, but my clone hadn't reached that level. Yang Qing looked surprised and sent a message to Big Four. "Do you know about the reincarnation tree?" Yang Qing suddenly understood. She only felt that she had opened up a small world. What kind of reincarnation tree was that? If Lu Yi mentioned it, I was afraid it would be a long time before I learned about it. Lu Yi's voice came. "There is no magical connection between the reincarnation tree's clone and the main body. That connection doesn't weaken even if they are separated by hundreds of millions of miles. That's why the reincarnation tree's clone in the 4 states doesn't have an ordinary ability. When it withers and retreats to the previous reincarnation, it can open a passage to the reincarnation tree's main body. Human Emperor Sect, remember that name. That is the name of the strongest sect in the 4 states. The real reincarnation tree reincarnates once every 10,000 years. From existence to non-existence, from large to small, it evolves the true essence of the universe. That's why he saw that it wasn't ordinary. That's because the truth is that it isn't 100 years old. Before 100 years, it will wither and grow again. But it didn't last long. I refined almost half of the sacred blood in the entire blood refining realm. The majority of it was refined because of my clone, so I didn't give it up. 5. Chapter 12:15. The thick yellow halo gathered and twisted, quickly condensing into a ball. Yang Qing reached out to grab Lu Yi and brought him to the ball of light. At the same time, he warned him, "When you get there, don't reveal that you are from 9 regions. If you need to report your origin, just say that you are from 9 heaven world." 9 regions had been hidden in the starry sky for tens of thousands of years, and had long disappeared from the eyes of the major races and top realms. At this stage, the name of 9 regions was not suitable to be mentioned. If the races and realms that had joined forces to deal with 9 regions knew, they would definitely search the entire starry sky. At that time, there might not be no risk of exposure. The thick yellow halo dissipated. On the nameless peak, a withered old tree appeared in front of the wooden house. Yang Qing and Lu Ye's figures had already disappeared. Little 9, who looked like a little white rabbit, rolled his eyes and instantly turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Mouth, it was not easy to finally get rid of the claws of the dragon race. Although he knew that the other party would come back, Little 9 had already made up his mind that next time, he would not be caught so easily. Somewhere in the distant starry sky, in a strange small space, Yang Qing's figure suddenly appeared. Even with his cultivation, he could not figure out the mechanism of this teleportation across millions of miles. This was no longer something that could be done by human strength. This was a unique connection between the reincarnation tree's main body and its clones. Just like him, this was also the innate ability of the reincarnation tree. But in the next moment his face sank, because Lu Yi, who should have appeared beside him, had disappeared. In a strange and multicolored small space like a condensed starry sky, Yang Qing said in a deep voice, "Old Shu, what is the meaning of this?" Dragon's might filled the air. It was completely different from the dragon's might that filled the air when Lu Yi was on the dragon throne. The dragon's might of a real dragon was incomparably strong and violent, almost condensing into a substance. Under such terrifying might, the condensed starry sky began to distort and tremble. There was no problem with the teleportation. If there was a problem, he would not have appeared here. But Lu Yi had disappeared. There was only one explanation. During the teleportation process, the reincarnation tree had done something that he could not detect. This had nothing to do with cultivation. This was the reincarnation tree's home ground. If the other party wanted to do something, no one would be able to detect it. Yang Qing was a little angry. No matter what the reason was, it was too outrageous for the people he had brought to disappear, without even giving him a heads up. And strictly speaking, this was the first time he had brought someone here through the reincarnation tree's clone. In the past, in the 9 regions, it was the people of the human emperor sect who dealt with this matter. Therefore, he didn't know what taboo he had committed, or what other reason he had for losing Lu Yi. But no matter what, he needed an explanation. An ethereal and aged voice suddenly rang out in this small space. Dragon Monarch, don't worry. This old man just wants that little friend to help me with a little something. Yang Qing frowned as she vaguely recalled something. The tree world? He asked, slightly surprised. The reincarnation tree replied, that's right. There's something wrong with the tree world. Yang Qing sneered. I told you before not to have the idea of educating without discrimination. Stupid. You should have killed all those races with ulterior motives long ago, or expelled them all. Although this was the first time he had brought someone here through the reincarnation tree's clone, he had also come here when he was roaming the starry sky, and had some interactions with the reincarnation tree. Therefore, he knew a lot about the reincarnation tree. The reincarnation tree chuckled. I gained something. I gained something. The heavenly Tao is fair and just. I have an almost endless lifespan. With great power, there will naturally be certain restrictions. So I have to be fair and just. What a joke! Yang Qing snorted. How can there be complete fairness and just? If that's the case, you would have been refined by others. You could have lived freely for so many years. You wouldn't have taken advantage of this time to ask for help. Since you have asked for help, this bowl of water won't hold up. Even. The reincarnation tree was still not angry. Dragon Monarch is right. I've been very distressed recently. An old tree that had lived for tens of thousands of years actually said that it was distressed. This was funny no matter how one listened to it. Yang Qing couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense and asked, why did you choose him? Don't tell me you know that he came from the 9 provinces. In this starry sky, perhaps all the races that had participated in targeting the 9 provinces were not sure about the survival of the 9 provinces. But the reincarnation tree definitely knew, and even clearly knew the location of the 9 provinces. This was because there were his clones in the 9 provinces. Through his clones, he could clearly sense the existence of the 9 provinces. Similarly, the reincarnation tree also knew clearly that there were cultivators from the 9 provinces who came here through his clones. Of course, that's not the only reason. It's just that there have been more problems in the tree world recently. So I invited a lot of helpers this time. He's just one of them. Yang Qing understood. Since that was the case, there was no problem. Back then, when the cultivators of the human emperor sect brought their juniors here, they often encountered such things, because the tree world of the reincarnation tree often had problems. This was related to the reincarnation tree's philosophy of life. Since there was help, there must be good ones. For the 2 little fellows in the divine ocean realm, who were not bad, this was also a good opportunity. However, Dragon Monarch, among all the juniors who came here this time, the little fellow you brought has the lowest cultivation level. Has the 9 provinces fallen to this extent? Yang Qing curled her lips and said, I think you're an old man. When did cultivators kill people based on their cultivation level, especially those from the 9 provinces? The reincarnation tree chuckled. Then I'll wait and see. With that, he stepped out and directly appeared in a relatively wide corridor. Behind him was a door with a number on it. Yang Qing silently memorized it. Later on, he still had to pass through here to return to the 9 provinces. He couldn't remember wrongly. If he really did, he didn't know which realm he would run to. He appeared suddenly, and almost bumped into a few figures passing by here. One of them hurriedly dodged. Then he glared angrily at Yang Qing. Yang Qing turned to look at him with a bad temper. "What are you looking at? If you look again, I'll wring your head off." The reincarnation tree had taken Lu Yi away, without giving him a heads up. It more or less affected him. The dragon race's narrow-mindedness wasn't groundless. Those who could come here were all from large realms. Those who weren't from large realms didn't have the right to come here. Moreover, regardless of whether they were glorious or not, their ancestors must have been glorious before. Because if they weren't glorious enough, it was impossible to ask for a clone from the reincarnation tree. How good could the temper of creatures from such realms be? The person who was stared at by Yang Qing was about to fly into a rage, but was quickly stopped by his companions. Although they didn't recognize Yang Qing's real body, it was really not good to cause trouble in this place. The leader said, "We're in a hurry. If we offend you, please don't be angry." The other party looked educated and reasonable, so Yang Qing couldn't say much. She just waved her hand coldly and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, she suddenly turned to look at the guy who was glaring at her just now. The corners of her mouth curled up and she sneered. "What did you say? Say it again if you have the guts." It just so happened that she had nowhere to vent her anger. That person's expression was indignant, and he was making a lot of noise. He didn't know which race's language it was. He thought Yang Qing couldn't understand it, but Yang Qing had roamed the starry sky for many years. What race had she not seen? What language could she not understand? The leader's expression changed, and he secretly cursed his companion for being nosy. He could only mediate. "Fellow Taoist, please don't take offense. My companion was just complaining, not cursing." *CKU. Yang Qing cursed. "Do you really think I can't hear you?" The person who scolded him just now didn't hide anything and shouted, "So what if he scolded you?" The reason why she was so fearless was because there were rules in the reincarnation tree. All guests who came here were not allowed to fight, or they would be disqualified from coming here again. Just this one rule alone was a rule that no one dared to violate. To a certain extent, whether or not one could enter the reincarnation tree was the standard to judge whether or not a realm was truly a large one. Take the current 9 regions for example, although it could also give birth to the constellation realm. However, without the legacy of the previous 9 regions and the clone of the talent tree, even if it had reached the level of a large realm in terms of size, it would not be recognized by the fellow Taoists in the starry sky. However, in the starry sky, there were still many such realms. Not every realm that could give birth to the constellation realm was qualified to come here. "Then you're out of luck." Yang Qing smiled sinisterly and walked forward step by step. The few of them were shocked, and the leader shouted, "Fellow Taoist, what are you trying to do? Beat you guys up." As soon as Yang Qing finished speaking, she pounced on them. The strength of these people was definitely not low. However, how could they withstand the old fist of a dragon? In addition, they had scruples in their hearts, and did not dare to be presumptuous here. In a short moment they were beaten black and blue, and they were in an incomparably sorry state. 1. What shocked them even more was that such a thing happened in the reincarnation tree. As the host, the reincarnation tree did not have the slightest intention of stopping such a nasty incident. Under normal circumstances, once a battle broke out, the reincarnation tree could completely stop it, or teleport the 2 sides of the battle into the starry sky. However, from the beginning to the end, they did not wait for the reincarnation tree to uphold justice. The information revealed by this matter was very shocking. Because of the person in front of them, it was very likely that he was an expert that the reincarnation tree did not want to easily offend. "Let's start the robbery now." After venting for a while, Yang Qing looked down at the few people who had been beaten to the ground. He did not kill them, and the reincarnation tree tacitly agreed to his venting here. He also had to give the reincarnation tree some face. If he really killed someone, he would have to give it some face. If he really killed them, the reincarnation tree would definitely not ignore it. This was related to the integrity that the reincarnation tree had established for countless tens of thousands of years. 3. Robbery. The few of them were all dumbfounded. Such a powerhouse. He actually wanted to rob them? Was there any justice left? Chapter 12:16. When the thick yellow color dissipated, Lu Yi suddenly found that he had arrived at a place with clear spiritual energy, birdsong, and fragrance of flowers. This is definitely not the 9 prefectures. The spiritual energy of the 9 prefectures is not so dense, so... I've arrived? This is teleportation. The whole process is almost unforgettable. Unlike the time when he went to the Wuxia continent through the Liyuan Great Array. What entered his eyes was beautiful purple and red among the greenery, and the tip of his nose was surrounded by all kinds of calm but fragrant flowers. There seems to be another very special fragrance. One just when Lu Yi was about to carefully look around, he suddenly felt that something was wrong, dodged to the side, raised his hand to hold the hilt of the Panshan saber, and looked at the place where he was just now. There was another figure in that position, but it was not Yang Qing who brought him here, but an extremely graceful and enchanting figure. The fragrance that lingered at the tip of his nose, in addition to the unique fragrance of all kinds of flowers here, was the fragrance of this woman's body. When Lu Yi Sherbao left, the first thing that entered his eyes was a white, dazzling light that made him a little dizzy. The woman was undoubtedly very beautiful, and had an indescribable graceful and charming temperament. Lu Yi had seen all kinds of beauties in the 9 prefectures, but in terms of charm, no one could compare to this woman. One coupled with her enchanting figure, which was the typical type of thin branches with fruits hanging on them, it could give a very strong visual impact, and any male creature who saw it could not help but take a few more glances. Lu Yi was now puzzled about one thing. Where did Yang Qing go? Who is this woman? Compared to Lu Ye's bewilderment, the woman's expression was much calmer, and she only pondered for a moment, and then realized what had happened. This was the benefit of having a reliable elder by her side. Before coming here, her elder had already told her about the current situation, so she could take it as it came. In contrast, Yang Qing was very unreliable, but this matter could not be blamed on him. He had been sealed for 10,000 years, and this was the first time he brought a junior with him as an elder, so he did not think of giving too many warnings, and the dragon race was not a meticulous character. This caused Lu Yi to be at a loss. When Lu Yi noticed the woman, she obviously noticed him as well. She tilted her head and glanced at him. When she saw Lu Ye's attire, she immediately felt a headache coming on. Soldier Mang. In the starry sky, each of the major sects had their own nicknames. Meat Barbarian, Magic Fool, Sword Lunatic, Soldier Brute, Ghost Shadow. All of these are closely related to one's fighting style. It wasn't that they looked down on each other, but there would always be some conflicts between their ideals. Among them, the faction that the magic cultivators were most willing to cooperate with was the body cultivators, because the body cultivators were tough enough and could charge at the front to attract the enemy's firepower, giving them ample time and energy to activate all kinds of powerful spells. The ones who were most unwilling to cooperate were Sword Lunatic and Soldier Mang Zi. Strictly speaking, these two types of people were the same type of people. When they killed, they didn't care about anything and had no intention of cooperating. Even if Lu Yi was a ghost cultivator, this woman would not have such an expression. However, when she saw Lu Ye's attire, she knew that the other party was a weapon cultivator. As soon as the words came out of her mouth, she hurriedly raised her hand to cover her red lips, and pursed her lips into a smile. I misspoke, fellow Taoist, please don't blame me. Lu Yi just stared at her. He didn't understand what was going on at the moment, but one thing was certain. This woman who suddenly appeared in front of him didn't seem to have any hostility. This made his actions just now seem to be making a fuss about nothing. When the woman curtsied, Jiu Xian Yu Yaorao, greetings, fellow Taoist. Was she reporting her origin? Jiu Xian should be the name of the realm this woman came from. As for the specific location in the starry sky, there was no way to know, Others were polite, so Lu Yi naturally couldn't be bad. Moreover, at such a close distance she should be the one on guard. Yes, Yu Yarao could see Lu Ye's origin as a weapon cultivator. So how could he not see Yu Yarao's path as a magic cultivator? She raised her hand and cupped her fist. Jiutian Lu Yi. Jiuxian and Jiutian sounded similar, but Jiutian was fake while Jiuxian was real. Yu Yarao pondered for a moment, and found that she had never heard of the name Jiutian. However, the starry sky was vast, and it was normal for a spirit sea realm cultivator like her to not know much. Since she could come here, it meant that this was a large realm, so she didn't pay too much attention to it. Junior brother Lu seems to be a little confused about his situation. Vanny Rao was undoubtedly someone who knew how to get familiar with people. Just now she even called out to junior martial brother. Because just now, when Lu Yi was filming U2B, the fluctuations were very clear. His cultivation level was one level lower than hers. This inevitably surprised Yu Yarao because as far as she knew, those who were qualified to be brought here by their elders were all at the 9th stage of the Divine Sea Realm. I am only a short distance away from taking that final step. There seemed to be no precedent for an 8th order Divine Sea Realm cultivator to come here. After all, which large realm didn't have 9th order Divine Sea Realm cultivators? It didn't make sense for a 9th order Divine Sea Realm cultivator to come here instead. I was just about to ask this senior sister. I came here with my family's elder, but after arriving here, my family's elder was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw senior sister. What's going on? Where is this place? Since others were willing to get close to him, Lu Yi naturally let nature take its course. Your elder didn't say anything to you? Lu Yi replied. He only said that he would bring me to the reincarnation tree. But when I look around, there doesn't seem to be any reincarnation tree here. It was a place filled with birds, fragrant flowers, and lush greenery. It had a kind of aloofness, but other than that, there was nothing else worth paying special attention to. Yu Yarao laughed. Your elder is really unreliable. She straightened her face and said, This is indeed the reincarnation tree. Strictly speaking, it is a tree realm. The so-called tree realm is the cycle of reincarnation. It can be said that there are an infinite number of them. As for which tree realm this is, I am not sure. As for why we are here. As for why? She paused for a moment, as if she was sorting out her words, before continuing. The reincarnation tree is a treasure of the starry sky. It has existed for tens of thousands of years. It accepts all rivers and streams, and it teaches without discrimination. Therefore, in this vast starry sky, there are many races who have lost their territories, or have to wander around for various reasons. They come to the reincarnation tree to seek shelter. The reincarnation tree has never refused them. After all, it has many tree realms, enough to accommodate those who have lost their homes and wandered around. Of course, there are also many who come here because of its reputation. Therefore, the reincarnation tree can be seen as a miniature version of the starry sky. Almost all the races in the starry sky can be found in the reincarnation tree, including us humans. We also occupy many tree realms here. Races can't coexist peacefully most of the time, which leads to some conflicts. However, everyone is making a living here, so they can control themselves, unless one situation occurs. What situation? Lu Yi asked in a timely manner. Not all the races who come to the reincarnation tree to seek shelter only come with the idea of seeking shelter. There are also some who have ulterior motives. They came here with the intention of plundering those rare races, because some of the rare races in the starry sky often have some very special abilities. Most of the disputes and conflicts between the reincarnation tree realms are caused by this. Lu Yi was surprised. If so, the reincarnation tree will drive them away. Won't it be over if they are driven out? It should be able to distract the reincarnation tree, right? Yu Yarao pursed her lips and smiled. She was really charming and graceful. I don't know how a woman in her 20s can have such charm. Of course, the reincarnation tree has such an ability, but it is the sect that established the world. Its purpose is to tolerate all things. When those races come, it will accept them, but will not expel them. It will also not take the initiative to do something for them. What will it do? Lu Yi said thoughtfully. Not taking the initiative so it can be passive? Yu Yara looked at him in surprise. Junior brother's mind is sharp. That is indeed the case. Take this realm for example. At this moment, it must have encountered some invasions. So no matter which race lives in this realm, they can send a request to the reincarnation tree, asking it to send people to help them. This is the reason why we are here. It is the reincarnation tree that sent us here. And what we want to do is to solve the problem of the reincarnation tree. Junior brother can treat this as a test. If you can pass, then you will have the qualifications to participate in the next battle of the Divine Sea. If you can't pass, then you will have the qualifications to participate in the next battle of the Divine Sea. If you don't pass, you may have to go back to where you came from. Lu Yi wanted to ask about the next battle of the Divine Sea, but after thinking about it, he decided to ask Yang Qing later. Asking here would make him seem ignorant. Until now, he still didn't know why Yang Qing brought him here. Yang Qing only said that they were here to rob something. As for what to rob, he didn't know at all. However, from the information he had obtained, it seemed that he and Yu Yara were natural allies, because the experience in this realm would determine the qualifications of the two of them. In this way, there was no need to guard against her. Lu Yi turned his head and looked around. Then, in senior sister's opinion, what race lives in this realm? Yu Yara said, in any case, it will not be the human race. If it was the human race, there would be traces of human existence. Although they didn't know how big this realm was, within the range of their divine sense, they didn't sense any living creatures. As for what race it is, they will naturally come to us. As soon as Yu Yara's voice fell, the surrounding trees suddenly bloomed with a faint light. Then, spots of light drifted out from the trees and gathered in front of the two of them. In the shroud of light, an illusory figure appeared and bowed slightly. I have made the two distinguished guests wait for a long time. First, thank you for coming. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.